Hello everybody, my name is Terry McClendon. The first time that I met Richard Bandler was in 1972. It was in a psychology class at the University of Santa Cruz. Richard was standing up in class and he was demonstrating his disgust for the psychology classes of that time. And I looked over and I said to myself, that's a man I want to be around for a while. That day commenced a decade of training by Richard and later John Grinder, which led me in 1979 to come to Australia and to establish the Australian Institute of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So it's 16 years from the first day that I met Richard Bandler that I'm very proud to present to Australia the genius behind neuro-linguistic programming, Richard Bandler.
Well, hello Australia. This is my first visit to Australia, and it's nothing personal, it's just far away. I thought this time, since it was my first time, what I'd do during the course of the next 2 days is to assume that most of you have some background. Now, is that true? How many of you have no background in NLP whatsoever? Okay. Well, there's a few things, and I'm sure the people that you work with will help you pick them up, that I'm going to skip over. See, in 1972, and 1973, and 1974, we were hanging around with people, psychologists, and there's a problem in America. If they educate people to a certain degree, they discovered there's an inverse relationship between their ability to be effective at what they do and the years of education that they have. They suffer from a disease I call being pompous. And if you give somebody too many credentials and they get into this, they start, for example, in the field of psychology, deciding that they're into objective observation. Now, one of the things that did what it's a phrase we use in America called blowing them out of the water, was to point out that these people who were so much into observation were missing something that was even larger than the nose on their face, which was that when people stopped and thought in pictures or words or in feelings, they made totally outrageous movements with their eyes that were noticeable. They did things like go, let's see. Now, these observing psychologists failed to notice this. In fact, part of the reason was because at that time in the field of psychology and psychiatry itself, they thought that if you heard voices in your head, you were crazy. So a client would walk into them and report that they were talking to themselves, and the psychiatrist would stop and say to himself inside his head, this guy is nuts. Now, as I began to notice that as an information scientist, because my background is not in psychology, it was that there was something going on here which I refer to as high comedy, which is that there was an entire field which in the United States at that time, and I don't know how it runs here, was afraid to know what it is that they knew. There was a movement called the Human Potential Movement. They called it that because it hadn't really gotten started yet. And it's just an opinion, of course. And inside that movement, there was a number of geniuses. There were people like Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, and Fritz Perls, who were very, very dynamic individuals who seemed to have more success. Now, there were actually some unknown people that I studied that had fantastic success rates with people. And I didn't just study the people in the field of psychology. In fact, I studied people like Ben Feldman, who was the world's most effective salesman. The guy sold $6 million worth of insurance, personal insurance, per year on a face-to-face basis. You got to, number one, be a fast talker to do that. And number two, you got to get up real early and stay up real late. He seemed to have a knack to be able to do things with communication that others couldn't do. So I kind of set out to find out what is the difference between the theory that's being taught. Because, see, I'm not a theoretician, I'm a modeler. And modelers they're the same kind of people that make cookbooks. They don't want to know why it's a chocolate cake. They just want to be able to make it so that other people can make one. And they're not really interested in, the theory of chemical bonding. Psychologists seem to be, and communication experts, you guys know what an expert is. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. Seem to be really tied up in being able to come up with theoretical descriptions of why people were broken. When I founded the field of NLP, primarily I did it because I did not agree that people were broken. that people had the problems they did because something went wrong at the age of 5, and that people got stuck in some part of their analytic development. It seemed to me that what is going on is very simple, that people have a lump of gray stuff in their head called a brain, and it just didn't come with an owner's manual. That, you know, when you go out and you buy one of these new digital watches, and if any bought one of these things, you know, if they didn't come with a set of instructions, you wouldn't be able to use it. I don't know, some of you, they have ones now you put telephone numbers on it, they have a calculator and stuff. Well, if you got one of those and it had no instructions, you wouldn't know what the hell to do with it. In fact, I have one with the instructions, I'm still trying to figure it out. Now, they have all kinds of new things. For example, I don't know if you guys have hit the VCR mania, but you're not a whole human being in the U.S. now unless you have a VCR. It's for those people who don't have good visual memory, I guess. But even these things now have remote controls and all kinds of gadgets, and they come with instructions. But I don't know how many of you have had children. They don't simply come with instructions. Not only that, your own brain didn't come with instructions. So what I set out to do was to find out how it is that the brain is capable of learning things that, number one, create excellence. And this is really where my emphasis has been, is not to really dwell on problems, because I figure most of the problems that people have, they have because they're not having a wonderful time. I very rarely come in and have clients that walk in and say, God, my life is just so great, I'm having too much fun. That's not what happens. They come in and they snivel. I don't know if that word means much to you here, but basically, if you've seen clients, those of you who are in the people helping professions, sniveling is what clients do when they walk in the door. They start to complain about how they can't do this, and they're unable to do that, and they feel bad about this. Now, if they were in a state of ecstasy, they wouldn't be complaining. So I set out to find out what it is that happened. Now, initially, I found ways of dealing with problems. For example, phobias. I love phobias. Phobias were my hobby for a long time, because the nice thing is you can tell when they're gone. I mean, people come in with an elevator phobia, and I always like to test. I never trust a client. To make sure they have the phobia, I'll drag them into an elevator, and if they scream and kick around and sweat, then I'll believe them. And then the next thing I'll do is to begin to find out, see, psychologists, what they did is they made an error. When they wanted to learn about schizophrenia, when they wanted to learn about phobias, what they did is they went out and got people who had those things. When it strikes me as they're the only ones who don't know. Because if you really look at what goes on in human beings as a learning phenomenon, it's not that human beings aren't capable of learning, it's that they learn anything without really much qualification. I mean, they can learn to be terrified of an elevator, or I've had clients that were terrified of the sound of gum chewing, not a real threatening thing. Now, what I began to do was began to find people who had phobias and got rid of them and ask them, what did you do? Now, I found out these people knew more about how to get rid of phobias than the phobics, because the phobics, you'd even ask them about it, they'd start sweating. Now, what I'd like to do is to jump over a lot of the techniques that I learned and get down to the real technology. That NLP is really built out of three things. The first thing it's built out of is an attitude. And this attitude, and for me, attitude adjustment in my students is one of the first things I work on. Because the attitude that works in NLP is a wanton and overwhelming belief that anything is possible. It's not that that's true. It's just that it's a good belief to have. Because if you believe any client that walks in the door, you'll be able to sell a car to, if you're a salesman, if you're a negotiator, that any deal is easily solved, and that any client, no matter how insurmountable their difficulties, are a piece of cake, you're going to try everything you know without reservation. Because I find that hesitation is the major difficulty for people in the communication arts being able to be wantonly successful. Now, the second thing is beliefs themselves. That when you really believe that clients that, see, to begin with, especially those of you in the therapeutic professions, that clients, to begin with, they're stuck. And if they're stuck and you're not, see, if they come in and they have your problems, then you're really in a bind. I always suggest at that point that you fix it in them, and if it works, try it on yourself. That's why they call it private practice, I think. Gives you an opportunity, I always want to try things out on other people just in case that something might go wrong, We call that the safety factor. Now, the third thing is that NLP is also built as a technology. See, through the years, one of the things that's happened in our lifetime is that the age of information came upon us with the advent of computers and IC chips and all kinds of light fibers and all this stuff. It's made it possible for us to have access to a wealth of information. That particular industry has gone through a growth rate which is just phenomenal. But at this point in time, it's peaked. And what's happened is that we have machines that can provide us a wealth of information. Now we need is human beings that can use it. Because what's happened is a lot of people, I don't know if the home computer thing is hit here like it has in the US, but it's like a virus over there. People buy these things, but inside of 2 years they end up being planter boxes. Because people don't know what to do with them. Because it's not just having information at your fingertips, it's being able to use your brain. Now, I sort of discovered that one of the problems with brains is that if you don't use them deliberately, you know how babies are with their hands when they're learning to use it? Before they learn to do it, it does things like this. Now, as you learn to use the muscles in your hand more and more, those of you who are musicians know what it's like to feel like a klutz. Because when you learn to do something new with a musical instrument, it takes you a while. But after you train the muscles to do it, it begins to become smooth. Now, it seems to me that the real failing is not a failing in the field of psychology, but a failing in the field of education to emphasize learning about what it is the brain can do and how it works well. For example, one of the things I found out was in the educational system, in the United States, we teach children to spell by a system called phonetics. I don't know if they do that here, but you cannot even spell phonetics phonetically. It comes out pahonics. Now, the thing is if they really stopped and found out what is it that good spellers do and bad spellers don't. Now, we found out that good spellers make pictures in their mind of the words and copy them down. Now, if you stop and think about it just practically, it makes sense. But in the school systems, they were teaching people, when people come up and they go, I don't know how to spell a word, they go, sound it out. Now, if the word was phonetics, they'd start with an F. Now, they go, but there are exceptions. Well, there aren't any exceptions if you do it visually. Plus, it's a lot easier to get a simultaneous representation. The visual system, the auditory system, your kinesthetic system, or the system made of your feelings, the olfactory and gustatory systems each have different properties and characteristics that make them more useful for certain tasks in certain sequences. Now, I want to begin this morning with something that's a little bit experiential because I believe that experience is always going to be your best teacher. You'll know what works when you try it and it works for you. Anybody can tell you, oh yes, this will work. And I mean, I've had people tell me that things would work, and when I tried them, they didn't. My first experience with that was scuba diving, and the guy forgot to fill the tank up. Now, in lieu of that sort of an experience, what I want you to do is just stop for a minute, and I want you to go inside, and I want you to think of a memory which is pleasant. And I don't want you to see yourself in the memory, because when you see yourself in an experience, it's not a memory, unless there are two of you. Just close your eyes and pick something that's a past pleasant memory, something which was exquisite at the time. And closing your eyes, by the way, is where the lids go down. If you guys have a problem with that, I thought I'd help you out. Because I want a nice, big, bright image. And what I want you to do is to start, and I want you to take that image, and I want you to turn the brightness up, just like you would on a TV screen when you turn the brightness knob, and make it a little bit brighter, and brighter, and brighter, and then turn it so it gets dimmer, and dimmer, and dimmer, and dimmer, and notice if it changes your feelings. What we found out in human beings is there's a direct correlation, or what's called a synesthesia pattern, between the intensity of your feelings and the brightness of an image. See, this is called driving your own bus. See, there's an old thing that I've always told people. I go, look, your brain is a vehicle that's driving down the road. And it's driving 100 miles an hour. The question is somebody sitting behind the wheel? Now, what I've discovered with many people is they're ricocheting off the guardrails on both sides. And I mean, their brain will even do things like wake them up in the middle of the night and scare the shit out of them. And they claim they have no photographic memory, but if they get in an argument, they go back and relive it 20 times that evening. Now, the thing is your brain on your side? See, what I'm trying to do is to get people to learn how to use the mechanism and what it'll do for themselves and to be self-directed. Now, I spent a lot of years doing hypnosis. One of the things I found about hypnosis was I began to get envious of my clients. They were doing things I couldn't do. Now, the other thing is I began to ask, I go, why if their brain can do all these things, can control their heart rate, their blood pressure, get memories back, make changes that are positive, and all this stuff in deep trance, why can't it just do it? It's their brain. It's the same brain doing it. I mean, just because I, speak spooky and talk to them weird and do strange things, how does this get their brain to do things that they can't get it to do, all day long? I mean, people claim they don't have a photographic memory, and they have the same nightmare every night. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me that the brain was incapable of it. While people were analyzing why these things were the way they were, I just began to try and find out what does it mean to take control of your own image. See, for example, some people's pictures are so close to their face they can barely see it. When they push them back, then they can see what's going on. I'll tell you another interesting thing, because subjectivity itself is really our experience of what our brain does. And what it's made out of is our pictures, our feelings, and the sounds that we hear. Try a little experiment, for example. If you take something like that happened recently that annoys you, and you know that, I don't know if they have the same saying here, but they do in the U.S., that people always say it to me, you're going to look back on this and laugh. And did they say that here? Is that a common saying? Well, my policy is why wait? See, I come from the country that invented McDonald's, though, So, it's not really quality, it's speed. Me, I wanted to throw the quality in. I want gourmet food, I want it right now. Now, the thing that I wanted to do is if you take some little thing that if you stop and you think about annoys you, what I want you to do is to look at the distance between the images and your face. Like, for example, if you think about some argument you had with your spouse or something recently, and I mean, not something that's a big deal, but just something that's just agitating you. Put the image up in front of you. And what I want you to do is just take the image and start pushing it off in the distance. Can you do that? It's a new submodality for you, Jeff, distance. We're going to go through them all till you get them all. Push it off in the distance, and what you'll discover is the further you push it away, the longer ago it seems. That it seems that we'll discover, we're going to play tomorrow a lot with something called timelines, which has to do with your subjective sense of time. You want to be able to change things so that when you wait in line, it gets short. And when you're in the movie and you like it, it's a long time. Most people subjectively turn those around so that, they can just sort of rain on their own parade. Now, did you notice that what I'm talking about happens to you? These are mechanisms that I've discovered are universal across culture, across language, and are things that can be used to not only solve problems, but to create more ecstasy in your life. Now, what I wanted to start with this morning is they gave you a little list. Do you have that little list thing? And it has a list of submodalities that goes down it. And on one side, it's got a blank thing, and on the other side, it has a blank thing. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start out this morning going straight for the throat. Because wouldn't it be nice if with yourself or any of your clients, you had the capability of being able to change a belief? This is yes, this is no. Gotta let me know here. Make up your mind. If you don't want to know, I won't tell you. I'll just do it to you. And I know some weird-ass beliefs. Believe me, I've had some strange clients in the year. The past year, I worked with a client who, he wasn't too mentally disturbed. It's just that people came off of the television set and followed him around. Now, when they tell me this, I was at him and go, yeah? And then what? Well, it turns out, I don't know if you get this show, there's a show called Little House on the Prairie, and on there there's this pissy little girl, and she gets out and nags this guy all the time, and then there's some other show, and he nags him all the time. So I decided this wasn't really schizophrenia, this was just bad taste. So I explained to this guy, I said, look, I said, this doesn't strike me as a mental disorder, this strikes me as a rare and unprecedented opportunity. I said, why aren't you watching the Playboy channel? And the guy looked at me and he went, you're right. I said, what the hell are you watching Little House on the Prairie for? For goods? I don't know what kind of, you have that sort of thing over here, but, I'd be down at the VCR store choosing my films, I'd say, she looks good, we'll be taking her home. But, see, to him, he also believed that these characters were real, and that there was no way in the world he could control it. So I thought back in my mind, and I thought, which is what I always do with clients, I always look at a client with the gentleness, kind of person I am, and I shrink them down in size, and I say in my mind, "You're mine." Because that's the attitude it takes to do NLP, is to go, look, so you think you have this problem, didn't you? So that you begin to build in your own mind the attitude that, look, this can't be this hard. And I stopped and I ran through all the things in my mind, and I figured, hey, Bugs Bunny can do it, you can do it. Because what I went to in my mind was very simple. I stopped and I thought about Bugs Bunny cartoon where the artist's pencil came into it and erased his mouth. And he couldn't talk. Raised his legs and he couldn't walk. And I thought, look, if you're hallucinating this floridly, then all you need to do is to begin to drive your own bus and decide what you hallucinate and whether it bothers you or not. So I began to put up in his mind these characters that were bothering him, having him do it deliberately, and to begin to control parts of them, like erase their head and put a giraffe's head on the top. I figure you're going to hallucinate, why fool around? Now, by beginning to take control of hallucinations themselves, you can turn them into something that's fun, and also something where you begin to make the distinctions between which people come off the television and which ones you're really having lunch with. Now, it strikes me that the human brain is capable of making the distinction in one person about what's shared reality and what isn't, then another brain can do it. And taking drugs isn't going to make them do it, because I know, because the people I grew up with took drugs and it didn't help them to know what reality was. In fact, most of them, it made it a lot more difficult. But just good, solid, hard work where you learn to drive your own bus, be in control of your own mind. For example, have you ever heard the phrase, that something is blown out of proportion in your mind? Well, this is what we refer to as people really knowing about submodalities already. Because what happens is people are making huge pictures. If you stop in your own mind, like, for example, and make a dissociated image where you see yourself in a roller coaster, in the front seat of a roller coaster, I would say, why fool around? You see your hair blowing in the wind. You see the color of your shirt. And then if you switch that image so that you're in the front seat of the roller coaster, and then blow it up about 5 times as big, you'll notice that it affects you. If not, check your pulse. Now, this is what learning to use your brain is all about. It's what NLP is about, is learning to literally take control over the things that bother you. That the things that people, because I have clients that come in, and they have these things that happened in their past that they're still sniveling about from when they were 5 years old, especially if they've had too much therapy. It's like they come in and it just immediately, what botherated me? Did you go get Gestalt over here? Did that pass through Australia? I have a black belt in Gestalt therapy. I can beat up any chair. It's where you call furniture up, hey, you couch, come here. And I always thought it was a great way to get people to be sane was to hallucinate dead relatives and furniture and yell at them. Right, that'll make you sane. What were these people thinking about when they did this? Now, it strikes me that if somebody has something that bothers them, part of the reason it bothers them is they have a big, bright image in their mind and they're thinking about it. Learning to control what you think about, when you think about it, how big it is, how bright it is, how small. Because if it was a little tiny image, down here it ain't going to bother them. It's them big, bright ones that get you. But they also can get you to do things which are exquisite. Because you see, there's a real difference between how many of you have beliefs that you know are wrong, that rain on your parade, for example? I mean, there are things you believe about yourself. You're unlovable, you're not smart, you can't learn quickly. Things like some of you probably believe that change is a slow, hard process. This is a belief I intend to blow right out of the water. We don't need that belief. See, I figure there's plenty of clients around. A lot of psychiatrists are worried they cure everybody. Then what would they do? And, get a job, I always tell them. One that's based on success, not failure. In the U.S., they pay people they pay people every week, which means the more you don't succeed, the more money you make. Which always struck me as an odd way to pay someone. I mean, can you imagine if your auto mechanic was paid that way? The longer it took to fix your car, the more money he got? Yeah, and again, bad taste. It's one of the poor judgment is a rampant thing in all societies, I've discovered. It's just like the major diseases that I've found in most of the cultures I've been in the world, and especially the U.S., is that there's a really bad case of seriousness going around. That when people get too serious, then of course they get crazy, because they start taking the weirdest things seriously. I've had people who had done Gestalt therapy for years, and when I pointed out that beaten up furniture was the first time I saw somebody do Gestalt therapy, I was sent down as an editor from a publishing company. And I walk in, and they told me that this guy worked with crazy people. And there was this guy sitting there talking to this chair. And he was crying, and he was, oh, I really loved you. And I looked, and there was nobody in the chair. And I went, wee-oo. But then I noticed that everybody else in the room was staring at the empty chair, too. Right? And then this old guy says to him, he goes, and what does he say? And the guy listens and reports back. Now, but does everybody look at him? No, they all look over at the empty chair. And I went, what we have here is group hypnosis. Now, sure enough, the question is, who is really crazy? Well, the question is, where does it really take you? The technology I want to present you here is designed to make the specific changes you want, when you want them, and if you don't like them, have the ability to change it back. Now, it strikes me that we've hit an age in the development of human beings where we don't have to make things a mystery to be able to deal with our own minds. When I first started teaching, when I first met Terry years ago, people in the psychotherapeutic professions were saying things to me like, you can't push the river. And I would look at them and say, never heard of plumbing, huh? That it strikes me that the things that we can know about the mind and how it works and how to control it and get them down and learned and out of the way is only going to open up the possibility that there are things we can do with our mind that we haven't even dreamt of yet. And hopefully in 15 and 20 years, those things will be second nature. Because the big frontier that lies ahead of us is being able to learn to think quicker and faster in a way that makes us happy. Because if there was just a lot of happiness going on in the world, I think there would be a lot less problems. If people felt wonderful, they wouldn't be nearly as cranky. And, they wouldn't go, well, we'll blow you up. I mean, the amount of weapons, the amount of things going on in the world are based on a model called scarcity. Scarcity is the belief that there's only so much, and the question is, how much of it am I going to get? Now, when you stop and think about what this schizophrenic had, he had the ability to create unlimited resources. So there is something to be said for schizophrenia, but controlled schizophrenia. Because it's one thing to talk to it, it's another to try and eat it and live on it. I hope. You guys are into phonological ambiguity, huh? Starting to catch on. Good. Now, what I like to do is I'd like to start by having you stop and think of something that you believe that gets in the way of you being as effective at whatever you do. Whether you run your own company, how many business people do we have here? Good. People into the secret side. Most of the work that I do now is with large companies, Fortune 500 companies and stuff, teaching them how to streamline their kind of training. Because I had this concept, wouldn't it be great if you walked into a hotel and the receptionist was nice to you? Right? If you called room service and they sent you the food you ordered. And I thought, boy, this could cut down the amount of cost and increase profits and all kinds of stuff. But it took being able to overcome some difficulties. For example, one of the major things that you have to establish with human communication is some kind of rapport. And because I've noticed that one of the things I noticed with therapists, with salesmen, people come in and they go, I'm looking for a really great car, and the salesman will go, well, I really feel that we can find something that will help you. Now, mismatching representational systems is one of the quickest ways to elicit distrust. And I've seen it 1,000 times where a very visual guy would go into therapy and he'd go, well, from my point of view, when I really look at it, I see that I have certain difficulties. And the therapist will go, and how do you feel about that? And the guy will go, huh? Now, the thing is that in order to get people to use all of the systems, because everybody has them all, it's only a question of how much control they have over which ones. You have to be able to start by matching people and leading them on. Now, where I want to start here is what I'd like you to do is to stop and think of a belief that you have about yourself that you kind of know is not true, but you believe it about yourself. It's not true for everybody, just you. About your ability to learn or change or be happy or whatever it is. And I want you to stop and think about it. And I want you to notice the following thing. I want you to notice where the picture is in your mind. That is, if you take this as zero asthma, right, is it up or down, and then right or left? Your own right or left. Okay, now, for example, Chester. Okay, you want to come up here, Chester? This water isn't really that interesting. Maybe this will help them a little bit. Yeah, you can use the empty chair. As long as it's empty, Chester. If it starts talking to you, duck. The chairs I've trained fight back. Now, Chester, when you stop and you think about something you believe strongly, okay, where is it in your visual field? Where's the location? It's behind you? Oh, it's auditory. Okay, so where's the sound come from? That direction. But it comes from your bad ear. Bad beliefs, bad ear. Makes sense. I go deaf in that ear, too. Probably no pattern there, huh? Come closer, Chester. Okay. I would... Trust me. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to stop and think about something that you don't really have any strong. It's just you could believe it, you could not believe it. You're not really sure. You can go either way. Okay. Now, where does that come from? Down there. Now, you guys surprised about that? See, if you watched him, he does this and does that. See, I found out people are fairly overt. I mean, I made a film at Marshall University years ago where they gave me a lady that had been in therapy for 16 years. She had a small problem. If people were late, she fell down on the floor and writhed in a psychotic fit, which could interrupt your day, especially if you hang around with people like I do, who are notoriously late. But she had been through psychiatric stuff and megavitamin therapy and all these things. And when they sent her in to see me, they put it on film and they said, I'll never be able to fix her. She walked in and I said, what's the problem? She said, well, I have a difficulty. I need to get more distance from her. That's what I call giving it away at the beginning, right? And as people were, of course, when people were late, she made pictures of them in hideous accidents. And the later they were, the closer they got. And, the bone sticking out of the arm and all this stuff. And of course that will freak you out. So, when I suggested that, as I do with most clients, that they stop it. Because usually they go, oh yeah. I go, if you're making pictures in your head that scare the hell out of you, make pictures of something else. It's like, it's always a good start, because most people have never been told that they can use their own mind deliberately. And if I taught her to push it all the way back and turn it white, then it didn't bother her anymore. Now, all the analysis in the world isn't going to get you to stop making a picture if you don't just stop making it. Now, what I want you to do, Chester, is I'd like you to think, what would you like to believe instead of what you do believe? In other words, if you could take this belief and change it, you know what you'd like to change it to? No, that's the one you don't care about. This one up here. Oh, I told you to pick something you didn't like. Okay. You better be careful here, Chester. So Richard moves through the world destroying all of good beliefs and installing his own. No, let's pick something that you don't like, something you believe about yourself that gets in your way, that limits you. Yeah, somewhere up there. Okay, you know what it is though, right? Okay, is it a picture or sound again? That one's a picture. Okay, and it's over on this side. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think, what would you like to believe instead of that? Just think in your own mind. This is secret therapy. You don't have to tell anybody. It can be as lewd as you want. No one will know. Anything. See, the sky is the limit here. Actually, it's not even the limit anymore. You can get higher than that. Okay. Picky. I can tell Australia. They do. Every time I order a drink, they tell me I order it wrong. I just asked for a shot, and it's like those Bud Light commercials. They have those over here? There's a guy, they have commercials in the U.S. now. Now, the United States has gone completely crazy about beer. And they make these commercials to try and convince you to drink beer. For example, they want you to drink beer because a dog drinks it. Swear to God, you think Americans are nuts. Wait till you should see some of these commercials. The hero in America is a dog that drinks beer, and everybody drinks it because his dog drinks it. Dogs drink out of the toilet bowl, for God's sake. But Americans going, a dog will drink it, it must be good, I swear to God, Americans are easily hypnotized. They watch so much TV. They have another beer commercial I love. These four guys out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, right? They got no girls, no food, they're sleeping in the dirt, right? And one guy around a campfire, one guy looks at the other one and goes, don't get no better than this, And I looked at that commercial and I said, the hell it doesn't. Now, I tell you what I want you to do. Is you know what you'd like to believe instead of this thing that you don't like. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to start by telling yourself that belief, okay, with the same tone of voice as the voice you hear up here. Step number one. Okay, that's the first thing. Then I want you to do it is I want you to take this picture that's over here. You know the belief that you kind of believe and kind of don't believe? That's the one down there, right? What I want you to do is take this picture up here. I want you to push it all the way out till it's a dot, and I want you to pull it up down there. So that, well, wait a minute, not yet, I'll tell you when. So that it's the same size as this picture down here, the same brightness, the same distance from you, all the same submodalities that we've been talking about down here. So you just take the one up there and go, whoosh, like that, okay? Ready? Go. Okay, you got it? Now, when it's down there, do you believe it? Yeah, it makes a difference. I mean, if you believed it a few minutes ago, do you still believe it now? Not so much. Kind of, could be, but not be. Maybe. It's probably just a coincidence. Now, Chester, I have this swampland I want to sell you. You need a good piece of desert? I want you to look down here. Do you believe? You salespeople probably wouldn't understand what I'm alluding to. You know where you put the contract with Chester, don't you? Do you believe this would be good for you? Now what I want you to do is I want you to take the thing that you really like to believe, okay? And I want you to take that, and I want you to just start with it out here, and I want you to go, put it over there. And at the same time, I want you to add this voice to it, so that you say it at the same time, okay? Ready? Go. Sounds good to you. You're not too auditory, are you? It is. Well, I stop and I say to yourself, Chester, this is useful. That one slipped right across. It's one of the things I love to do with clients is to understand that language moves very, very quickly. So when I want to put ideas in their head, I just look at them and I go, I stop and I say to yourself. Did you get it that time? And then you fill in the blank. Of course, you wouldn't use that in a sales motif or a business negotiation. That would be unethical and quicker. So, now, when you stop and think about the belief that you prefer, you believe it. Oh, yeah. Well, solid boost. Thank you, Chester. Now, let's get down to brass tacks here. What I'm suggesting is if you can change a belief that quickly, because people have always told me, beliefs can't be changed. And I go, which ones now are beginning to change in your mind? Because I believe that anything that's learned can be learned differently. If you don't concentrate on the ideology behind it, you concentrate on how you believe it. So you have to have in your own mind a way of knowing what you believe and what you don't believe. See, for example, some people put what they believe on one side and what they don't believe on the other. And what I'm going to have you do now is a two-step process. And we're going to go through this all together. See your little list in front of you? Thing like that. What I'm going to have you do is I want you to go through system by system. Oh, a blackboard. I love blackboards. Did I get shocked too? Oh, goody. That's enough to write with and throw. Now, the trick to this is as you go through, the thing is I want you to take something which is a strong belief. All right. And something which is a weak belief. Now that's not something you disbelieve. That's something which might be, might not be. Don't really know, don't really care. See, because we don't want to turn the thing they believe strongly into a strong doubt. We want to turn it into something that's inconsequential. See, I've always found that you can fight with ideas or you can just dilute them. And for our purposes here, what we want to do is to take a strong belief, which is an unpleasant belief. It's people, they believe that, they can't learn, that they're not lovable, they can't be dynamic, they can't be charismatic, they can't be wealthy. See, I found with salespeople, the most powerful thing in the world is for them to believe that challenge is fun. And it also might be useful for people in other professions. That if you believe that a good challenge is really a party, that you're looking for the hard stuff to do, and that's what makes it interesting, then one of the things that's going to happen is you're really going to take on things. You're going to really do a lot more, and you're going to really have what we call go for it. Something we'll get to later. Now, what the steps that I want you to do is, first I want you to go through what's called elicitation. Elicitation is simply the process of going through and finding out what's there without changing anything. What I want you to do is I want you to go back and forth, submodality by submodality. Have the person think of the belief they want to change, and think of something that could be, could not be, doesn't matter. And notice, are the images in a different location? So we want to go through each of the things on that list. For example, right now, stop and think of one in your mind. Think of something you really like to get rid of as a belief, and something that's Now, I want you to notice, when you think about them, are the pictures in a different place in your mind? This is yes, this is no. There. Take a few minutes. Think of one, think of the other. The trick to eliciting submodalities is always to use comparison, because it's hard to compare one thing. By noticing the difference between things, then what you do is you go on your list and you go, this is on the right, this is on the left. For some people, it'll be up and down, and for some people, it won't be that different. But you're only interested in which submodalities you find a difference in. You want to know the location of the auditory stuff, the size of the images. If the images are both the same size, but in different locations, then ignore the line called size. Just go through and write in what the difference is on just the submodalities that are different. The ones that are the same, they don't matter. You're looking for the minimum set of information to provide you the opportunity to make quick and rapid and dynamic change. Because as soon as you find out what the difference between a belief is and something that they could be, could not be, you can take any belief they don't want and change it. Like that. And it stays. When I show you a little trick about what makes the human mind have things stick in it. Because through the years I've studied memory. And just recently I came upon something very interesting called foundation theory, which is a new holographic theory of memory, which they actually documented and proved. And it turns out that it verifies what I've always believed, which is that a human mind can learn quickly, but cannot learn slowly. Which is a mistake they've made for years. You can ram things in real quick, and they'll stick. But if you ram them in slowly, a little bit at a time. For example, consider, have you ever seen a series of stick figures written on a pad of paper? When you flip through it, you can watch the stick figure move. Now imagine if I just handed you one of those once a week for a couple of years. Would you know what it did? No. But if I go, you flip through it, you can see the pattern. Your mind will understand, and it will recall it. It's the way the mind works. So when I ask Chester here just to simply take that picture and go, move it out and move it in, it'll stay there. Now, I don't know why, but being a modeler, I don't have to. I'm exempt from that problem. I found out that it is very difficult to move images from side to side. They just want people go, they'll say what you said. They won't move, right? But moving them out into the distance and then moving them over, for some reason they'll do that. But we're going to start here with just the beginning piece. What I want you to do, because we're going to learn to build new beliefs, what I want you to do is to go through and do the elicitation so that you know the difference between a belief and between something that's a weak belief. Just, could be, could not be. Once you know the difference, what I want you to do is to take the belief that they don't want and move it away and pull it up into a weak belief, and then have them take the thing that they want to believe and whip it into where their strong beliefs are, so that you build them a new belief that they want. Now, also, since some of you may have trouble with instructions, we've also provided you with, did you get those little things? So this thing here. Then go get one. You will go get one, but not right now. In a minute. I'm going to send you off. We have other rooms so that you can turn and work with each other and stuff. Because these chairs are bolted down. I'm not used to chairs being bolted down. This, by the way, age regresses me back to when I taught college. Can you believe they let me teach college? Fresh meat to carve every day. Then they had me teach semantics. Something I have no belief in. So I simply taught them to understand the meaning of words by using, since you can't do hypnosis in college, I taught the closed eye process. And then when they pulled me up in front of a board to complain about it, I taught them closed eye process. That's it. Oh yeah, it was a 2-hour meeting, and they didn't remember much, but they knew they were happy. It's the old thing. I said, you're enjoying that. Can you feel this? You guys will get that one. So it'll come around again. Now, on here, there's the thing. Where is it? Number 4, changing beliefs. Just in case you forget the instructions. But I want you to, especially since this is the first time around, to concentrate on the elicitation. I promise you, if you can get the elicitation, if you can learn to find out what the difference between any set of submodalities, and I mean this in terms of we're going to do things like motivation, taking things you're not motivated to do, and boom, making them so you're motivated. Take things you believe, change them into something else. Change is, when you're around me, a very quick process. And it, because we're going to cut through a lot of the bullshit and get right down to how you do it in your brain and how you make it last. So concentrate not so much on the actual process of change. Concentrate on really going through one by one. Don't try to do all of one. Don't try to do the strong beliefs first and then the weak belief. Do it one submodality by one submodality. Notice if there's a difference in location. They'll have to think about one, think about the other, tell you if the location is different. Then you ask about the distance. Have them do one, do the other, notice the distance. Constantly go back and forth. Do the comparison. Once you have the comparison down and you learn to compare submodalities, the rest of this is a piece of cake, and we can get right down to what matters to me. What's the difference between what creates ecstasy and what doesn't? You guys want more ecstasy in your life? Now, the trick is that now what we're going to do is we want to begin to install some of the more useful beliefs. As far as I'm concerned, if we can begin, if you understand what it is that takes and builds a belief for yourself, we can begin to get some of what I refer to as go for it. See, I've found through the years that in order to do NLP, it requires that you have some of the right attitude. Once you get some of the right attitude in your own mind, it begins to make it very, very easy to do the rest of the things. See, NLP was developed, especially this stuff, primarily by myself and some people who are fairly ferocious in nature. That it coming from my background, my idea of being mellow is like most idea of people being frantic. But the thing is that to me, I'm a consumer of life. I want, it's like, to me, I want to be able to get things done, get them on the highway. Now, if you can begin, as some of you, over half of you in here, we're able to take a belief and change it like that. The rest of you are going to be able to. It's really just a question of getting the elicitation down, of realizing and beginning to start noticing things that you never noticed before. When you were born, so you didn't come with an owner's manual that said, when you want to intensify feelings, enlarge picture, bring picture closer. Now, it would be nice if this was taught to us when we were young. In fact, we have a program that one of my companies has started that's called Re-Educating America. And they're funding us multi-million dollars to go into one educational system and show them what can be done. And we're going to come out with some fairly ferocious children, because it's our intention to be able to teach them the basics in education like this and get down to what I consider more important. See, in our educational system over there, for example, we have this silly notion that spelling, for example, is important. Now, see, I have a button on my computer you press called spell. So it doesn't strike me as a life or death matter. But many of us as children ended up feeling stupid because we couldn't spell or because they taught us fractions, which seems to be the way to torture people. And you really want to see what you do is they start out pretty simple. What they do is they draw a pie, and they go, and they split it into 4 places, and they go, that's a fraction. Kids go, right, fraction. I can understand that, 1/4 of a pie. Then what they do is they start telling you to do things like invert and multiply. People get sick. Now, I don't know how many people here are like, in the U.S., all I got to do is say the word fraction, and I can watch body tremors. See? But if you put them in your mind, big fractions, and you cover them with chocolate, if that's a fetish you have, then suddenly you get drawn towards it. The trick in life is to be able to take the things that you're really drawn towards and to be able to make them so you do the activities that you want. One of the nice things about being able to master the use of submodalities in your own mind and to other people's is that you can begin to get yourself to be motivated to do things in ways that you never have been before. Now, NLP requires in its attitude a little bit of real go for it. And I found kind of a subtle way of approaching that. Subtle. Yeah, subtle like a sledgehammer. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to try this, because this is the beginning to build a huge internal world. That when I find that the people that are alive and vibrant, see, for example, I was talking to somebody in this room, and he was talking about, he did this, he went, my strong beliefs. And I looked at that little tiny picture, and I went, you know, he'd be the kind of guy you could reach out and just go, and he'd go, I got news for you, that stuff works, I love it. You know, it's like, you know, people go, well, I don't believe I can buy that car, and I go, yeah? And go, and I go, now, watch what's in my hand. This is the point at which we want to begin to take our internal representations and begin to build in something that's dynamic. So what I want you to do is I want you to start by picking a belief about yourself being able to pick up. You're going to be here for 2 days. Believe me, I'm going to power through as much material as I can. But I want you to have a belief that wherever you use this stuff, that whether you're a business person, a negotiator, whether you're an educator, you got them. They're raw, man. Boy, kids can do this stuff like crazy. You'd be surprised. You can get, because I mean, you can get them to memorize words, making big, bright, solid images. You can do all kinds of stuff. For example, I used to teach the 5th grade. Boy, that was nice. And they gave me in my class all the kids that were quote unquote learning disabled. Now, this is the biggest bunch of nonsense I ever heard, because if they could learn by the age of 5 that they're stupid, you know, when there's nothing wrong with them. And they told me these kids, you know, couldn't learn, you know, the right from the left, and they couldn't spell, and they couldn't read. And inside of weeks, I had them all doing those things, because I understand something about learning. If learning is fun, people do it a lot. And if learning is boring, then it becomes attached. There's a thing in NLP called anchoring. And I don't know how many of you know about it already, but it's one of my favorite toys. There's an old guy named Pavlov in Russia that discovered that you could take a dog and show it food, and when it drooled, you could ring a tuning fork. And if you did this a number of times, when you hit the tuning fork, the dog would start to drool. Now, there's a guy who counted the drool. Now, I don't know what you put on your job application when you did that before, but drool counter here, collect unemployment for a long time. I don't think there's a great call for that. But we found out that there's a real difference between dogs and humans. Humans are capable of one trial learning. Now, I know this because I learned it from phobics. I used to hypnotize my phobic patients and age regress them and find out how did they get to be phobic. It's one of the things I love about hypnosis is that you can be as nosy as you want. And I found out with the lady I mentioned earlier who had a fear of gum chewing, that what happened to her is her father was a burly kind of outdoorsman guy, and he didn't want her to be afraid, you know. So he took her skiing, and they were going up a ski lift, and he grabbed her by the foot and hung her off upside down. Now, she did not learn to be afraid of heights, by the way, because she was a smart kid. She closed her eyes. But she was scared out of her mind, and he was chewing tobacco. Now, the sound of chewing tobacco got associated with being terrified. So when people chewed, it triggered off those feelings in a one-trial learning. Now, we've learned ways of being able to use this which are extremely useful, and we're going to play with those after I do what I'm about to do. It allows you to be able to take any set of feelings and to associate them with anything. So one of the things I'm going to want you to do is I want you to stop in your own mind first, and I want you to find something that when you think about doing it, there is no hesitation. For some of you it might be golf, for some of you it might be sex, for some of you it might be chocolate. Whatever it is, that when the picture of it in your mind is there, you go, I want this. I want this now. Can you find something like that in your mind? Now I want you to stop and make a big, bright image of it. And when you begin to get back some of the feelings in your mind, make the image bigger. Close your eyes. Make the image bigger and brighter. Turn the volume up if there's any sound. Right? until you really begin to get inside it and capture some of the feeling of knowing what it's like to be drawn towards something. And I want you, at the moment you really begin to peak the feelings, I want you to say the following sentence in your head. You're mine. And sound like you mean it. I want that voice in your head to reverberate from the volume so you can feel it in your chest. That's right. Now, as soon as you begin to get that feeling, I want you to switch over in your mind, and I want you to see a screen that's down a canyon. So there's hills on either side, a huge screen. And what I want you to put on that screen is an image where you see one of the clients that you've had in whatever context that gives you difficulty. And I want you to swell up and look down a ravine at that big screen. And I want you to put lightning crackling up either side of the canyon so that there's static electricity in the air to the point where you can hear it sizzle. And on either side of the Black Canyon, I want you to put singers chanting, "Go for it. Go for it." And I want you to look down at that little thing on that huge screen, and I want you to say in your mind, "You're mine." And I want you to hear the canyon rumble. Now, this is the way you approach subtly NLP. With one little addition. Do you guys know what a puma is? A big cat. And what I want you to do is also put in front of you a big cat licking its chops hungrily. And I want you to float inside it so you can look out of the cat's eye. I want you to look at a little lamb off on the side and feel full and say to yourself, "I could eat you if I wanted to." And look down that canyon at what appeared before to be a difficulty and just say to yourself, "You're mine." Think of something that you're really motivated to do, whether it's eat chocolate, play golf, whatever it happens to be, something when you think about it, you go, "I'm going to do this right now." And then stop in your mind and think about something that you've hesitated to do for years that you really want to. Now, do they make you feel different? This is yes, by the way, and this is no. Now, what I want you to do is just in your mind, go back and look at one, look at the other. Is there a difference in the location of the images? Is there a difference in the size? In the distance? Is one a slide and one a movie? Is one in color and one in black and white? Do you see yourself in one and not in the other? Is the sound coming from a different direction? Does it have a different volume? Does it have a different tone? See, for example, how many of you in here rag on yourself about things? Stop for a minute. Stop thinking about it. How many of you have a voice inside your head that gives you a bad time? Tells you shitty things about yourself and stuff like that? Right? Pain in the fucking ass, isn't it? And to think it's your own damn brain. Right? And you can even say in your head, "Shut up," because you always say that to me. You know. Now what I want you to try is something. I want you to stop and think of somebody who will say your name in a way that makes you melt. Perhaps a lover, perhaps a child. Somebody that when they say your name, you go, "Yeah." Now what I want you to do is, in the same location as that nagging voice, you know what the voice nags about you about, right? What I want you to do is, from the same location, I want you to start nagging with yourself, but put that voice up there, so it nags you. Is that different? You see, it's your brain. Now, maybe you'll be able to listen to it because perhaps it was right. You never know. Either way, it'll feel a lot better, and you won't get so tense. I work a lot with corporate executives who are so stressed out and they have ulcers and all this stuff. And it's not the pressure from the outside that gets them. It's the pressure from the inside. When they change their voices to pleasant, melodic, sexy voices, and it's saying, "Oh, you have to go to this meeting." You know what I mean? Somehow or other, they can get there with a smile on their face. And that's what it's all about. It's about having a smile on your face, doing the same things you do with your mind. But you see, when we were kids, like, people motivated us by going, "It's time to get up!" Right? You know, so we ended up doing that inside our head because that's all we knew. But we also know what it's like to have pleasant, melodic tones. If you can change that inside your mind, now go back to the two things, the one you were motivated to do and the one you weren't. Now what I want you to do, if there's a difference in the location of the image or the size of the image, take the thing that you want to be motivated to do from the position where you're stuck and move it to the thing that you can do easily. Just the same position, the same size, and do it this fast. And discover when you look at it now, does it feel different? One nod. You move the position, the size, the tone, the voices. Doesn't feel any different. Put chocolate on the top of it. Bait yourself. The thing is I want to begin to install in you the attitude that your brain is a tool. It's just like your hand. If you learn to do things like play piano with your hands, you have greater precision than the average population. The greater precision you can begin to learn to use your brain deliberately, the more things you'll be able to do and the more things you're going to want to do. You can begin to change what you're motivated to do. You can begin to change what you believe. You can even begin to change what feels good. Because you see, there's nothing a priori. Some people enjoy jumping out of airplanes. Now, what I want to suggest to you is that as you begin to learn these things, you can begin to learn that the brain doesn't function haphazardly. It's you doing it anyway. It's just a question of beginning to do it more and more deliberately. Now, let's see, what time is it here? We have time for one more. What I want you to do is I want to do one more exercise before lunch. What I'd like you to do is to think of one thing that you really understand. Can you think of one thing you understand? I have to do this in the morning because by this afternoon this gets done. Think of, this is yes, by the way. Bear with me here. Just think of something that you really understand. Then what I want you to do is to take something that you're confused about. That should be simple by now. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to grab a new partner and another one of those sheets of paper, and I want you to go through and find out what is the difference between confusion and understanding. Because if you can begin to learn that understanding isn't a passive process, it's something that's done. Now, once you go through and find out the difference between something you understand and something you're confused about, for example, you may discover in the confusing one, the images are unfocused, you know, or perhaps they're off where you can't see them. I've had people, the confusion for them is a picture here, and they can't look at it. Well, that strikes me as something. But as you go through, with each step, not this time all the way at the end, but each time you go through and find out a difference, I want you to move it around to understanding. So you take what they're confused about and make it so they understand, not the reverse, okay? Do you understand? We turn confusion into understanding, not the reverse. I had this mixed up in a workshop and they all came back like that. But it was in Oklahoma, so it didn't matter. There are some places in the States that you guys wouldn't believe, you know, that somebody was telling me that this was a country town, boy. There are some places in the U.S. I've taught where they not only don't know things, they don't even suspect things. In fact, there's a few foreign countries that I've been to that like that entirely. Go unmentioned, or at least another. But anyway, so get a new partner. Now, the process that we just went through is a process to be able to give yourself a chance to pull out of your unconscious and find out what it is that you actually know about something. Because I found out through the years of teaching, people were always going, "I'm confused, I don't understand," which is true. But if you listen to the sentence, it's I don't, that's the conjunction of the word do not understand. That is, I do actively the process of not understanding. I found out when I used to teach a class, actually I still do from time to time, called the flirting class. Because I discovered that the two major real diseases that I find mentally that exist. One is seriousness, and the other is loneliness. That many people in this world, even if they're with people, are lonely. They just don't know how to have fun with other human beings. And the flirting class isn't really designed to teach people to pick up chicks, although that is a byproduct. It's designed to teach people how to flirt and enjoy it so that they can learn to be more playful. And I found out that with people that were extremely shy, I would say, how do you know when to be shy? You're not just walking down the street and go, you feel shy. You have to know when to do it. It's like disappointment. Disappointment is something that requires adequate planning. It's not something that just happens. You have to know what to be disappointed about. You have to know when to be disappointed, so you have to plan it out ahead of time. And most people don't realize that they're doing these things. Now, with the people that were shy, when I'd ask them, I'd go, how do you know when to be shy? They would say to me, when I don't think people will like me. That is, when I do the process of not thinking that people will like me. So if you have them literally go inside and build representations that people are going to like them, they're not shy. I found with most of the problems that people tell me, if you really listen to them, they tell you exactly what to do. That when people tell me, they have a problem they need to get more distance from, when people tell me that they don't think that people will like them, I understand they're doing these things. They're not happening to them. Most people's experience is they experience the world as if they're at its mercy, as if things are happening to them, and as if they're not an active participant in it. When you really begin to drive your own breath, and really begin to become more ferocious about life, you begin to actively turn these things around and start realizing that it's not that things fall out of the sky, it's that you've learned it and you learn to do it well. The thing about phobics, think about a phobic. They don't forget they're phobic. They don't hop in the elevator, go up to the 3rd floor and go, I forgot to be scared. What happens is it's automated. So their experience is they have no participation in it. But when you begin to take them through, as in the book Using Your Brain for a Change and Frogs and the Princes, it has the standard phobia cure. And the standard phobia cure simply puts people actively into the process. So they begin to get control over their own experience and can decide what to be phobic about. Because there are some things worth being phobic about. I mean, people who wantonly overeat need a phobia of their own refrigerator. There are some husbands that need a phobia of other women. I mean, all of these things are processes which could be used in a useful fashion, but not necessarily if you don't actively learn to control the mechanisms that produce fear. Somebody in here asked, well, where does comfort and discomfort fit into this? Well, where it fits into it is that you begin to have the ability to determine what you're uncomfortable with and what you're comfortable with. These aren't things that are God-given or genetic, because if they were, we would all be uncomfortable about the same things. We're all uncomfortable about being burned alive. That's a little hardwired. But, being uncomfortable because somebody looks at us funny, or because, somebody, it's like, can you believe this? I made a film. They had me work with 3 clients, and one of them is called Fear of Authority Figures. And they brought in this guy who had fear of authority figures. Well, to begin with, he's got to figure out who an authority figure is. I made that simple for him. And I asked him, I said, what's the problem, kid? He goes, well, I'm afraid of authority figures. And I said, what? Like that. And sure enough, I always test to make sure they have the problem. And he was there, right there, having it. Now, the thing is that if I can't get him to the point where he understands that he's making the decision about what an authority figure is, and then he's got to scare the hell out of himself. These are active processes. But when we learn to do them at the unconscious level quickly, they simply don't seem that way anymore. By slowing them down and pulling this unconscious stuff up. Some of the people in here have said to me, they said, well, I don't see pictures. Well, I got news for you. That's bullshit. You do. You have to, or you couldn't answer questions like, what color is your house? How many pieces of furniture? And somebody said to me, well, those are images. Well, images, pictures, don't get pissy with me. That's what they are. Now, if you can learn to manipulate them and control them, they influence your life. You either want to drive your own bus or you don't. And if you don't drive it, somebody else will. People have said, well, isn't NLP manipulative? And I say to them, I go, no more than anything else. Because I'm not doing anything and teaching you anything that you're not doing anyway. It's only a question of having the control. See, manipulation, just because you do it unconsciously, is still manipulation. It's no different. Once it's conscious, then at least you can make a choice about whether you're doing it or not. people who said, well, what happens if this falls into the wrong hands? I keep trying to tell people it's been in the wrong hands all along. For God's sake, you know, it's now time that it gets in our hands. I'm sure the CIA knows all about this. Believe me, I know they do. The thing is now it's time for the rest of us to find out about it. You know, they're not the ones that are going, well, is this moral to be able to change a client quickly, you know? What about the deep hidden inner meaning? Well, deep hidden inner meaning, you know, all problems, as far as I can tell, are caused by birth and growing up. You know, and since there's no way around it, you know, that's worth having that I can tell, the thing is that all it meant is when you were growing up, you learn to do whatever it is you do. You learn to be afraid of what you're afraid of, you learn to hesitate when you hesitate, and you learn to go for it when you learn to go for it. Now, if you could learn it when these people that taught you to be afraid of these things didn't know what they were doing, I mean, most of the parents aren't trained in these techniques, so they don't know. So let's make them afraid of this, you know. It happens haphazardly. Haphazardly, it can work so well that you're afraid of the same thing every time. Once you understand this technology, you can set yourself free. You can learn to make life a rage because you can begin to determine where you're going to be afraid, where you're going to be out of control, and where you're going to be in control. And you don't have to do it every minute of every day, because that's too much trouble. This is a technology to make life more practical, more fun, and easier. To be able to do what you do easier and quicker. When you're going to sell a car, you sell a car. When you're going to negotiate, you negotiate. And you realize that if you put the contract in the right place, somebody will want it. There's a place where images go where people have to have whatever's in them. So if you put your contract there, people are going to sign it. But if you put your contract in the place where they never want it, even if they want it, they won't sign it. So you're either going to get in your way or you're going to work in your own best interest. And it's in everybody's best interest that we become more functional as an organism. There is no replacement for learning. See, for example, there are certain unconscious processes in all languages that are used as triggers. For example, if somebody says something to you and instead of responding verbally, you just lift your eyebrows up, it makes them feel compelled to talk more. Now, these things are hardwired in. They're in every language on the face of the earth. And they're very, very strong things that induce compulsive behavior. What we're going to focus on here is a little bit different. What we want to be able to do is to take the best feelings that people have and to be able to reinduce them as resource states so that people can use them when they need to. Now, we're going to amplify that a little bit with submodalities. And I thought as a good example here, would you come help me for a minute? Yes, you! Just by virtue of demonstration, I'd like to show you how this works. Just sit down. Right here. That'll be fine. Don't mind me. I'm just going to whisper in your ear. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to whisper in her ear, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her to remember the last time she experienced and to see what she saw at the time and to hear what she heard, to induce a state. See, for example, whether it's motivation or it's frustration or it's excitement, one of the things I want you to do is to begin to train your eyes to notice that when people are in one state as opposed to another, they'll show you that literally, you know, that if you pay attention to their breathing rate, their lower lip size, changes in skin color, not so much facial expressions, but you'll begin to see that there are involuntary responses which change. And if you stop and think about it, somebody's really excited about something, they look different than when they're depressed. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. But to be able to take it and to use it so that it becomes both a therapeutic tool or a tool for selling, because see, like when I teach salesmen, I teach them to walk in, and when somebody goes, before they show them anything, I say to them, literally, I want you to stop and think, have you ever seen anything, and when you looked at it, you knew you had to have it? When people stop and they go to remember it, you reach out and you mark it. And then you say, now, I'd like to show you a car. Now, if you can associate feelings with other things, literally trade feelings from one context to another, it allows you to be able to take the incitement and the enthusiasm that you have for something, or the courage, or whatever it is you happen to need at a moment in time, and to be able to attach it to something else that you would need. So, I'm sorry, what's your name there? Lyndall. Okay, Lyndall. Now, so that they're not distracted by content, I'm going to whisper in your ear, and I'm just going to ask you, and I want you just to remember whatever the events are that surrounded the example that I'm asking, okay? Now, what I'd like you to do is to remember the last time that you were overwhelmingly and exquisitely excited. That's right, that's good. Now, if if you notice just the subtle changes in her face, I don't know how much longer I can do this for a living sometimes. Because I get this from people, they go, well, it's really hard to be able to influence people. And I go, right, what is that in your mind that went away? Now, on the other hemisphere, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her another question. Now, what I'd like you to do is, now, if you'll notice, that's subtly different. Now, the trick is to be able, when you elicit a response, to not just elicit the response, but to be able to make it a resource. See, for example, if I go over here, you just let your mind go blank, that's fine, I'll take care of the rest from here on in. You'll begin to notice that there are certain subtle changes that occur. That's right, you're in control, just keep telling yourself that. Now, once you're able to anchor a response, and the thing is it's real simple. Now, I'd like to teach you a trick that I teach my students when they first learn. Because what makes anchoring work is the following. It is the ability to elicit an intense response to start with. Because I have people, and they do these exercises, they go out, they go, I want you to remember the last time you were really excited. This does not work, right? Your voice must be congruent, because the reason they call it eliciting responses is because what you've got to do is to elicit a really intense set of feelings so that you can be able to use them. Now, you know this response over here? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, okay, but don't laugh. Okay. Now, I want you to think of a situation where you need that response and you don't have enough of it. Where if those feelings came up absolutely automatically, life would be more of a party. Can you think of something like that? Now, when you think about it now, do you feel those feelings? Of course not, because you would need them if you did. It's called a rhetorical question. Well, it is. It's one of my most powerful tools, as far as I can tell. That's why I always get the answers from clients that I want. Next I go, do you want this now or in 5 minutes? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes, that's right, and go back, and I want you to think about that context. Only this time, you're going to take this with you. That's right. Take a deep breath. There you go. That's right, therapy's tough, isn't it? Got a minute? Now, what I want you to do is just clear your mind for a moment. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to just go back and think about the context that you were thinking about. And there it is, all by itself. Now, this is just to me an adjunct tool of what we were working on this morning. Because if you begin to add to the use of submodalities the ability to also anchor in responses, it makes it a lot easier. Because some people have trouble changing the submodalities over. If you add in anchoring to it, you have an added device. So, anyway, thank you very much. Well, when I asked for a blackboard, Terry, you didn't fool around, did you? Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you the secret of anchoring when you're learning. Most people, when they anchor, don't realize that what happened was when Pavlov did his experiments is that, see, to begin with, Pavlov worked with dogs, and dogs aren't nearly as good at this as humans are. They can't do one trial learning. And when they fired off the tuning fork, the dog would salivate. Now, if the tuning fork wasn't a 440 tone, it was a 460 tone, the dog would salivate less. Which means when you anchor, the precision of your touch, that is not only the location, but the speed with which you apply pressure. And by the way, you do not need to squeeze people's arms and legs off. It is not how hard you squeeze that anchors it. It's how precisely you do it. So I teach my students to do the following. When they're learning, I teach them to do this. Get a little chalk on your fingers. That way, when you walk up and you go and you anchor somebody, you can tell where you anchored them. Sneaky, huh? Now, by doing this, it allows you to be able to walk back up and to be able to learn to put your hand in exactly the same place. The closer you put it. Now, also when you anchor, you don't want to anchor in a place. Sorry about that here. Now it's all gone. It won't work anymore. Um, we'll talk about that later. Now, you can also do it with tones as well. Now, but to start with, in this process, what I'd like you to do is to anchor kinesthetically. Now, moving with my favorite subject, I decided that what we're going to do is I want you to go back, and this time you're going to elicit submodalities. Only what I want you to do is to have the person stop and think of something that falls into the class. Freaking schmuck here. Of ecstasy. Now, you guys know what ecstasy is, too. I don't have to translate this for you. It's something that when you think about, the inside of your mind goes, yum. Now, what I want you to do on one side is to pick something which is ecstasy, and then I want you to pick something which is okay. It's good, but it should be better. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go through a two-step process. Okay, you're again going to elicit the submodalities, but you're also going to do something else. You're going to get yourself a little chalk so you can be precise. And what I want you to do is as you sit the person down and you say, I want you to stop and go inside your mind and remember the last time you thought of something that constitutes for you the feeling of absolute and utter wanton ecstasy. And then you just kind of anchor it. Now, of course, you can't find any applications for this, can you? I mean, like in your personal lives. Because I wouldn't suggest that you go home and do this with your spouses and your friends. That would be manipulative. You wouldn't want to go around making the people in your life that you love feel good, would you? That wouldn't be fair, because it wouldn't be authentic. It's better that you're authentic and unhappy. See, too many people in the human potential movement found out who they really were and vomited. Now it's time to get down and make them better people. You know, so when they found out what their real self was, they looked at it and they went, ooh, that was enough of that. Now, what I want you to do is to go through and you're going to create an anchor for ecstasy. So when you have them go inside, I want you to realize that it's not enough to just ask. You have to elicit. And this time we spell elicit this way. What? Does this ring a bell? Now, what I want you to do is to realize that what you have to do is to take your tone of voice, your creativity, and to be able to induce in them with ease the ability to remember an event such as we're talking about. Now, they don't have to describe it to you. All they're going to have to do is to go inside and remember what it was like when they were there. Now, once you have elicited and anchored ecstasy, then I want you to have them go and think of something which is good, but it should be ecstasy. They'd like it to be ecstasy. See, for example, I do this when I train telemarketers. I train them to go into the state of ecstasy each time they pick up the phone and dial for a cold call. I even teach therapists to do this when they ask for money. Well, because most of them can talk about sex, but they can't talk about money. You know, it's embarrassing. It's like not authentic to want to get paid. And, me, I'm cash up front. I make it so the client goes into ecstasy each time they put a bill in my hand. It's orgasm, orgasm, orgasm. Now, once you've elicited and anchored ecstasy, you've also elicited and anchored okay, a good experience. I want you to go through and find out the difference in the submodalities. Now, if people have trouble remembering the ecstasy state, you simply fire off the anchor, and somehow or other it will come to their mind, subtly and quickly. This allows you to keep them in one state and get them to the other so you can go back and forth and find out the difference in the size of the picture, the intensity of the picture. You will find in some of these that there are tastes and smells as well. So you might want to check those gustatory and olfactory as well in this particular set. Now, once you found out the difference, I want you to use a technique called the swish pattern. And the swish pattern is very, very simple. You have them take the experience, much the same as I did with her, and think about the experience. that they want to change. In other words, the thing that they want to change. When they look at this image, it feels just okay. And what I want you to do is in the lower left-hand corner, have them put an image where they see themselves in the situation that's okay. But as they move that picture up, I want it to go into all the submodalities of ecstasy, and I want you to fire the anchor off at the same time. Is that clear? Anchoring only works if it's done precisely. And I mean the precision with which you must do it is absolute. Because if you're a little bit off, you get a little bit less. And it's like, the knee isn't to place. It's where you touch and the amount of pressure you put on. And the rate at which you put that pressure on. It's also, when you anchor ecstasy, you want to anchor, or you want to stay there, one or the other. It's also, you have to elicit the response. See, if you sit around looking grumpy and depressed and stuff, if you don't smile, if you don't bring it out of people, I mean, when you say ecstasy, you got to sound like you mean it. You can't say, well, remember the last time you felt some ecstasy. This kind of stuff doesn't work. This is for people who are alive. If you want to be a depressive, go study analysis, man. This is a technology that is designed for people that want to have some gonads, so to speak, with life, that they want to go out and do things and be able to influence the world around them. And it's not, like this. You've got to be precise about your touch. And it's not just your touch, it's your facial expression, because the way you look is an anchor. I mean, just the way you look can be enough that you can look over and induce a state with just a certain kind of movement. And you want to be able to do that so that intensely you're able to influence the people around you. Because if you're cranky, you're not going to put a smile on the face of the people around you. You got to start with yourself and work out. NLP is for people who want to go first. And I mean, it's for people that want to put themselves in the right state to do it. You remember the exercise where you go inside and you look at the client, you go, you're mine? I want you to do that at the beginning of each of the things we do here, so that you put yourself in the right state to do this. You've got to be ferocious in your attitude so that you know that you're going to get people to do things. You're not going to take any guff off of them. They're not going to be able to explain. Because clients always want to explain all this stuff. They go, yeah, but, I can't move my pictures. Bullshit. They will if you yell at them. I mean, I look at them and I go, move it! And they go, oh yeah, there it goes right now. I mean, this is not for timid people. It's for people who are tired of being timid with life. I mean, I got all these shrinks who are always telling me, well, what about borderline people? Go fuck it, kick them over the edge and pull them back up. I mean, for years, they sent me every psychiatric impossible they could think of. And I mean, they were desperate because they were starting to feel bad about the fact they couldn't do anything. I mean, they sent me anuretics. I mean, these people that, I love these people. If they don't see a bathroom, they feel like they have to go to the bathroom. And, so me, what I'd do is I'd say, see that bathroom? And I'd anchor it. And then I'd go, there's none over there. They go, ooh. And I'd anchor that. And then I'd go back and forth till they literally learned that, look, this is not something that you can't learn to control. The question is, did they want me to, or did they want to do it themselves? The thing is, for example, most of us in our lives have to do some things that are boring. This is be the next step. See if you can pick it up on the next round, Lee. We'll catch it. It'll come back around. You can have the feeling that you're going to get better soon. Yeah. It's just your sexual future that depends on it. Not a lot. You feel it getting bigger and stronger right now? Anchor that feeling and take it everywhere you go. Because if you're going to act impotent, you're going to be impotent, is what we say down south. Now, the thing is that what I want you to do is to now think, okay, now in your life, there's a lot of things you have to do just because they need to get done. And the thing is that a lot of these things I find with clients is that when I do business training, for example, a lot of times you have to write invoices at the end of the month. You have to do, there's a certain amount of things you just have to do. I mean, you have to get up in the morning, for example, is one of the big ones for me. And especially if it's before 11. And drive to where you have to go. And if you drive, and these things, like, they make you tense and they bug you, I want you to stop and think that's real different than things you have a fetish for. Do you guys know what a fetish is? Obviously so. Everybody that's the first time I got a universal, yeah, I know what a fetish is. Well, now, wouldn't it be nice if you had the same feeling about the things you have to do all the time that you have about your fetishes? Would that strike you as something that would be useful? See, my clients, instead of concentrating on, oh, I'm so depressed, I want to go and talk to dead relatives and beat up furniture. I mean, I don't fuss with that stuff. I go in and begin to give them fetishes for the parts of life that are worth having. So that, it's not that, well, I should go out and meet some people. I make it so that when they're sitting in the house, they start going, there are people out there. Let me out. I want to develop a fetish in them so that they're drawn towards it. It becomes a compulsion to get out and participate in life. Because I found out if I do that, they forget what their problem was. I mean, most of the time, people come in and they go, well, I have a terrible problem. And I go, you have a terrible problem, didn't you? And they go, huh? Because I use temporal predicates a lot. We're going to deal a little bit with time tomorrow. Where we're going to start out with, okay, the next feat that I want you to concentrate on is I want to teach you a way of anchoring which is more intense, and a way of taking submodalities to now begin to make things that are good even better. Because, it's not enough to have ecstasy. My philosophy is more ecstasy now. Because the thing is if you stop and think about it, part of what produces the intensity of the feeling has to do with the distance of the images, the volumes of sound, the location of sound. Literally, that creates the intensity of feeling. Now, if we want to build for somebody a really good fetish, now I realize some of you have clients that come in that want to get rid of them. You can also use the opposite of this technique to diminish unwanted fetishes. I mean, I've had clients that had fetishes for shoes. I mean, what a waste. I want them to have fetishes for something that's useful. I don't want them sitting around sniffing the bottom of the closet. I want them out participating in life. Things like warm, full, dry, and then party. The essentials of life as far as I'm concerned. I want them to concentrate on the 4 major food groups: fun, sex, money, and the other one's not legal. Now, the thing is the way to go about this is now I want you to take your list. And what I want you to do is to have the person think of what it is in life that gives them the greatest thrill to the point where they compulsively want, if they could do it constantly, they would. If their heart could take it. Now, I don't suppose any of you could think of something like that now. Think of something that really, when you think about it, you must smile. Now, when you sit down with your partner and you ask them about this, if they don't smile, try kicking them. If that doesn't work, threaten them. Whatever it takes to get them to literally stop and think of something to the point where it begins to put a smirk on their face. A smirk is a beginning. See, I know when I work with depressives, when I start thinking about, well, look, you have the choice of remaining depressed. And if you think you're depressed now, I can make it a lot worse. If depression is what you like, I could take depression to all-time lows. I could make it to the point where you're so depressed you can't open your mouth or your eyes. You're simply stuck there forever. Or you can begin to take the most minimal feeling of pleasure you've had and very slowly have it begin to spread, not just throughout your body, but throughout your life. Now, I want you to weigh those things and choose. Which do you want? Wanton pleasure or catatonia? Now, some people have to actually think about it. Those are the ones I tell them to close their eyes, go inside, and stay there. Now, on the other hand, the people that choose life itself, what I do is the following. I want you to take the list of submodalities and have them go inside and find the most intense memory they can find of pleasure. Something that so to speak, rings a bell. Something that when the moment was so special, it's like the air was full of static electricity. It's like you could reach out and touch it and it would go. It has sizzle to it. Something that has real zing, and something that if they could just have it a lot, they would really enjoy. Now, you have to remember, again, you have to elicit the response from them. Once they find it, tell them to close their eyes, and what I want you to have them do is to begin to go through, and I want you to take the list of submodalities and tell them to make the picture bigger and brighter until they find the size where the feeling becomes the most intense. Then have them change the distance till they find the most intense. What we want to do is find any submodality that will amplify this feeling. Now, I'll tell you what you're going to do. Will you come here a minute, Sandra? I just want to show them how to do this for a second. There's no reason to be embarrassed. Here. Sit down, there's nothing to worry about. Okay, just close your eyes for a minute now. And I want you to think of something which is exquisitely pleasurable. I mean, perhaps you could... Now, when you get a subtle response like that from somebody, right, and you have a subtle anchor for it, now I want you to see what you saw at the time, hear what you heard, and then... I sell the questions later, by the way. Then what I want you to do is I want you to start by making an anchor. Then what I want you to do is I want you to go inside and I want you to make the image bigger, right? Even bigger. That's okay. It can get bigger now, right? And turn it up until you reach just the edge of the maximum intensity. And then change the distance forward and back until it becomes even that much more intense. Now, each time you do this, as you begin to notice more intense colors, see, for example, turn the volume up now. Now, what you do... That's all right, you can turn it up even louder. There you go. Now, you just have to know which ones do which, that's all. You guys will learn this. You learn through practice. It's half the fun of getting there. Now, each time you get a more intense response, what I want you to do is to take the anchor that you have in one location and begin to move it so that you build an anchor that's called a sliding anchor. So each submodality that you notice, the lower lip fill out in size, the skin color become more intense, the breathing becomes slightly more rapid, then what you do is you take that anchor and you extend it. So you begin to build an anchor which is cumulative in nature. And as you go down that, for example, if you take, now, make the tones even deeper in the auditory. That's right. There you go. A little louder. Picture a little closer. Atta girl. That's right. Now, once you have yourself a sliding anchor like this, now, what I'd like you to do, Sandra, is to think of something in your life that you would like to make more compulsively exquisite. Something you do every day that you'd like to enjoy. There are little tasks like cooking and cleaning and making the bed, odd sundry other things, where if it felt this good, you like that one? Gee, and this is my first time, too. Now, as you think of that, now go inside and just think of making the bed. And imagine if just doing it felt this good. That's right. Take that feeling right with you. There you go. Now, what we do is we build for somebody a new fetish. Because as long as you're going to do it, you might... Can make it anything you want, sugar. There you go. Go back and... I'll take it. Well, you can do it for yourself. They call that something else, but... There you go. That's what we call self-satisfaction. I think you can sit down now, Sandra. Once again, demonstrating that change is painful, takes a long time, and is hard in just the right places. Now, what are you going to tell your clients when you go back into your private practice, those of you who are therapists? I always get this in the U.S. They go, if I just go back and start using these techniques, what will my clients think? And I always tell therapists, I go, yeah, you wouldn't want to change. It would set a bad example for them. Oops, got them in the ego. Now, it's all right to use these things with your clients. You could just tell them, you changed, and they will now. 2, 3, 4, many reasons. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to concentrate on this, is that as you go through, congruency is the game. It's your voice tone, your enthusiasm, your facial expressions. It's learning to look with just the right twinkle in your eye that allows people to be able to get to the states. Because people forget. See, you know what I noticed about the brain? If you don't learn to use your own brain deliberately, you have all these shitty experiences and you think about them constantly. You relive them. But when you have ecstasy ones, you don't relive them. Now that strikes me as a bad deal, right? So I swapped. I now have my bad experiences in other people. I go, here, you go relive this. I don't want it. Right? And I concentrate on the things that I really enjoy and relive those, because it is my brain and I'm going to drive my own bus. Now, I wouldn't recommend to you now that you consider making that change in your own life, but it makes things a lot more fun. Now, I do this with my clients, and I work with everybody from CEOs, I do sales training, I don't care what it is. When I train people in the business world, I want to train salesmen to be ferocious. I want everybody to be ferocious about life, but in the most pleasant way. Because there's enough pricks in the world, let's face it. When it comes to finding unpleasant people, there doesn't seem to be any shortage of them, at least in America. And certainly in other countries. I'm sure the Soviet Union is not a party where you have to wait in line for 2 hours to get toilet paper. I mean, they really need this one. Let me tell you, I'd give them this one so they could stand in line and go, oh boy, I'm getting closer to the toilet paper. You have to excuse me, I have a thing about Russians. It's any country that they use guns to keep the people in instead of out of, I figure it's got a bad program going. It's just an intuition I had, Now, the thing I want you to concentrate on here is literally going through and finding the analog submodalities. Now, some submodalities themselves are digital by nature. You are either in the picture or out of it. That's digital. Things are either a movie or they're a slide. Now, the thing is if you concentrate on the analog, that is the ones that can change slowly. You can slowly make pictures bigger and smaller, closer, further away, brighter, dimmer. You can make volume louder, 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 or softer. You can make the tone change, the tone of an internal voice change so it becomes softer and softer tones, mellower and mellower tones, more seductive and seductive tones. See, I've always noticed that people have these motivation voices in their head that yell at them to do things. It's a lot easier to use a voice that's seductive that says, wouldn't you like to cook dinner now? All the sweet smell. Don't you feel yourself getting up off the couch, rather than the one goes, well, it's time to cook dinner now. It's the inside of your head. You can have it be any way you want. Now, if you want, get bad tonality in your head, I'm convinced bad tonality is what causes cancer. It certainly is what causes stress, and it certainly is what makes people's face get sideways all the time. You ever notice people with really lopsided faces? That's because there's something yelling in it. And they're going like this. Stop it! Shut up! They go to a psychiatrist and go, this voice is bothering me. And the psychiatrist goes inside his head and goes, it must be crazy. Now, what I want you to do is to concentrate so that you really watch closely this time how the person's face changes. So that as you have them, and if you're having a little trouble, have the person do the following. Have them literally sit and hold one of their hands up like this. And tell them that when the feelings become more intense, to lift their hand up, and when they diminish, to lift them down. When you see their hand going up, make the anchor slide up further. When the hand goes down, lift your hand up. Each time it goes up, slide it, and when you see more and more intense, because what we're into here is making intense feelings even more intense. We want to get on the edge of thrill-seeking, because after all, this is the first day. We want to take the fun meter, we want to punch it right out to the red line, pull out in the fast lanes, and start making sparks off the guardrail. Because when you start to get feelings that are that intense, you can begin to translate them to any context. So that, when you take the depressive and you go about going out and meeting people, and they start to do this, you just take your finger and you start to run it up. And, you don't have to do it on their knee. You can use their arm. I like to use the back of people. I usually sit next to them and run it up their back because it gives them chills anyway. And they start doing this, and they go, I feel totally different. And I go, you are. Remember this, always. Now, do you understand what I'm asking you to do? And what I want you to do is first go through, amplify something absolutely exquisite so that we make more ecstasy. I want you to make a sliding anchor so that as you make the best they have even better, make a sliding anchor for it. And then I want you to pick 3 contexts, and you can ask them, what are 3 things in your life where you really need to get some juice going because it's boring? It might be at work. I know that especially those of you who are clinicians, people come in and complain every day. It can get real depressing. Especially if you think about anchoring. Your client comes in and goes, oh shit, I'm so depressed. And you try to be warm and empathetic, so you reach over and touch them on the knee and go, it's going to be all right, thereby anchoring their depression. So that way, if they start to feel a little better, you go, now, isn't that nicer? And they go, well, no. I've seen this 1,000 times. Anchoring is not something that you don't do. See, most guys wait till their wife's in a really foul mood, and then they go up and hug her. Thereby, when she's in a good mood, you can hug her and she'll feel bad. I'd wait till she was in a good mood and hug her. Then when she's feeling bad, you can edge your way up on it and bring her out of it. See, you have to use this stuff with a real practical sense, because this is going on every day all over the place. You're just learning to be methodical about it. Milton used to do that. Going back and forth, deeper and deeper. No, we'll get to that later. Don't get me started on hypnosis. You guys don't want to know about hypnosis. I can tell. Do you? You really don't. Okay, well, maybe if you do this real well, I'll show you a few little tricks of the trade. So what I want you to do is take about 10, maybe 12 minutes apiece. I want you to power through this. Don't discuss it. Just do it to them. Make more ecstasy with a sliding anchor, and then go through and pick 3 different contexts, have the person think of the context, and while they are, slide that anchor off so that they begin to take ecstasy and distribute it throughout their life where it belongs. Understand? Go for it. When I teach an introductory workshop that only goes on for a couple of days, one of the things you may have noticed is that I like to kind of power through material. So I like to recommend to you that maybe this evening and definitely on next week, that you spend some time with somebody going back through these exercises, because once isn't enough to really begin to get these skills down tight. And I want you to keep in mind that these are just skills. Just as quickly as you can change and intensify ecstasy, you can intensify motivation. You can intensify trust. You can intensify loyalty. That all of the things that have to do with the states that human beings can go into are things where you can begin to take them and intensify the degree to which people can feel it, and to begin to translate it to places where it's useful. To begin to take and put confidence where people need it, where they need trust, you can put it, and where they need caution, you can put it. I find this is extremely useful with teenagers, that to literally sit down and to understand that what I'm providing you here with is a plethora of examples. And the examples themselves are not by any means extensive, but it's an opportunity for you to get a foothold on a technology. And if you simply begin to apply yourself and begin to really think of it rigorously and to spend some time every day, you will discover that you learned more in this workshop than you knew about. And also it'll give you the opportunity to refine your skills. Anchoring is a skill of precision. The more precisely you do it, the better the results. Elicitation is as well. Since there aren't numerically that many combinations, if you elicit these things from a variety of people, after a while when they walk in a door, you know. I especially do this with salespeople. Clinicians have a little bit more time to work with people, and they can go through things more methodically. But you want to spend time, there's a whole world, and you can do this with anybody anywhere. You'd be surprised. I mean, I sit down in the airplanes and in bars, and my favorite thing is, I don't know if you know who Robert Dilts is, but Robert Dilts is one of my favorite students, used to be Terry's partner. And Robert Dilts and I were sitting in a bar one day, and it's kind of a sleazy place that was around the corner from my house. And it was about 10 o'clock, and we were talking and doing some equations, and this guy got up and started trying to pick a fight with us. And he was saying to Robert, he goes, "You guys are a bunch of queers. He says, why don't you kiss her or come outside and fight with me?" And Robert turned around and he looked at him and he said, "How do you know you want to fight with me?" The guy says, "Well, I just know." And he said, "But, well, is it a picture or words or a feeling?" And, and I got up and I went to the bathroom, and I found a large solid object. I was just going to club the guy to death. And I came back in, and when I walked back in, Robert's got a book open, and the guy's going, "Well, you see, when it gets to be about 10 o'clock, then the picture starts to get bigger, right? And I can see myself getting into a fight, and Robert's going, and then the picture gets bigger, and the guy goes, yeah, it's one of them little VCs, because we do a calculus with this stuff. We have a notational system. For those of you who read NLP Volume 1, we have a notational system which makes it a lot easier to literally go through and find out the strategies by which people do things, whether it's make decisions or buy things or get in a fight at 10 o'clock at night. Not exactly what I would call the most elegant use of NLP, but Robert is the kind of person that could get lost in the fold in a table napkin and study it for years. But diligently. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take this now all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum and begin to talk about something which you may find is common, stress. I don't know if you have it here in Australia, but it is rampant in the rest of the world. It certainly wasn't evident on the plane that I was on here. It's just that there were people clawing the curtains off the walls before we landed. Something about confining that many people. And I always loved it. Do they do the thing with the commercials here where they make it sound like you're going on a party? You know, in America they do fly the friendly skies, and, you know, and it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And, you know, and all it is a metal tube. And then you sit there going, and I'm always going, where's the party? So I found that you can create one. They give you a microphone at the beginning of the plane. You can tell jokes, have a good time. They have buttons you can push, all kinds of fun things you can do. Or sleep, which is always another choice. Probably the best way to fly is unconsciously. I think they should just gas everybody on the airplane. I thought about that. Nitrous oxide and those little vents they have, man, knock everybody out and then wake you all up with oxygen when you land. Wouldn't that be the best way to fly? Well, to me, you know, you wouldn't have to fuss around with the people next to you, you know, going, gah, 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 gah. People crying and screaming and moaning and, you know, and having to eat poison food. I mean, it's one thing, it's like, you know, fly the friendly skies, we will poison you with this. Go ahead, you know, and they have something called Salisbury steak. You guys have it good. Qantas has pretty good food. American Airlines, I don't know if any of you have ever had the pleasure. I don't know what person they have prepare the meals, but they look like they should be coming out of you, not going into you. Now, with that cheery thought in mind, what I'd like to do is I'd like to now show you that you can use submodalities in an entirely different way, just as you can use them to amplify states, such as ecstasy, such as having fun, any kind of orgasmic state you can think of. And by the way, speaking of anchoring, there might be a use there. It's just if you like having more than one, I don't know, it's up to you. That one of the things is that a lot of times to create experience in life, one of the things I found out is it's variety that creates intensity. So very often with people I work with, I have to teach them about relaxation as well. So what I wanted to do is to stop and to show you that you can use submodalities in much the same way. That submodalities themselves can be used to induce states where people go into much more comfortable and relaxed states, so to speak. You want to come here? You look like you're halfway there anyway. It's the joys of sitting in the front row. Now, just sit down here. Now, the thing is that what I want you to do is, in order to induce a mild state of relaxation, this is going to require just a little concentration. And I realize some of you have trouble with hand-eye coordination, but it's really very simple. What I want you to do is just simply walk up and introduce. You don't have your name tag. What's your name? Mike. Okay, Michael, I want you to just look at your hand. That's right. And watch the focus of your eyes as it slowly changes. That's right. And then just close your eyes. That's right. And think of a time that you were pleasantly relaxed, comfortably, with a growing sense of satisfaction. And as you take a deep breath and relax, what I'd like you to do is very slowly realize that you can go through and take the image where you see yourself relaxing comfortably. And as you make it larger and larger, if you begin to feel relaxed even more, I want you to allow your hand to float up. And if you begin to feel like you're becoming more awake, then let your hand float down. And to literally run through and make the image bigger and then smaller. And if it starts to relax you, then intensify whatever change relaxes you more. You can make your own internal dialogue so that the volume increases and decreases, so the source of internal sounds closer or further away. Now, with each of you, what I want you to do is to run through and to literally take the submodalities and to go through and find out what heightens relaxation for the person. They'll literally take the image where they see themselves and push it further away. Not yet, guys, I'll tell you when. And to go through and to be able to make it so that you find a very deep, deep state of relaxation for yourself. Now, once you've found, and the person looks like they're mildly relaxed, then what I want you to do is to reach over and say, in a moment, I'm going to reach over and touch you on the right knee. And when I touch you on the right knee, you'll remember it and remember this feeling each and every time I do. And when I touch you on the left knee, you'll simply comfortably and with your own sense of growing satisfaction, feeling very refreshed, return back here to Earth Coincidence Control Center. That's right. Now, this allows you to be able to put clients in what I refer to as a receptive state. Because one of the things with clients that I want to be able to do is to make certain suggestions which they will take and use in their personal life in ways which will benefit them. That's right, all the way back now. Because when you're able to get people to be able to relax, they become more receptive to certain ideas and understandings in such a way that you will be able to assist them at their own rate and speed in being able to become more relaxed or not. That's right, all the way back now to this room and time and place. You can take a nap later. Okay, you can go sit down. Thank you. Now, knowing the speed with which human beings can relax comfortably, I've discovered one of the easiest ways to assist them in that is to simply walk up and to realize that there's a motor program that's built into people in this country, where you reach out and you simply begin to engage in a handshake. And it's automatic for the hand to come up. And you simply pass it in front of their face and point and tell them to look at their hand. That's right. And notice the changing focus of your eyes as you begin to relax. Close your eyes now. That's right. Take a deep breath and really begin to respond in a way that's comfortable and see yourself relaxing. And the more you relax, the better you'll feel. And as you do so, look at the image where you see yourself relaxing. Slowly have it move further away from you, and if you feel more relaxed, then allow your hand to float up slightly. And to find the point inside your own self which is most relaxed and most comfortable. Now, if I were to continue with Dr. Bill here, I would take him through each and every submodality, but since he knows what they are, he can do that by himself. And find a state of deep relaxation and realize that each time he wants to go back in it, all he need do is touch himself there and say, relax. And he'll be able to go back into this state and feel comfortable whenever he wants. And of course, when he's ready, all he need do is just think about this knee here, and he will return back here to this time, place, coordinates, comfortable and refreshed. Now, a lot of people have told me through the years that inducing altered states in people is difficult. Once again, I couldn't disagree with them more. Because all it takes is the ability to speak at the same rate that somebody is breathing, and to be able to realize that all an altered state is changing the submodalities in your mind. Every time you change them from anything to anything else, it changes your state slightly. By going through now and cataloging which ones lead you into states of relaxation, you can build an anchor for yourself, which means you can always take yourself out of stress. All you need to do is reach down, touch yourself on the knee comfortably, and you're in na-na land. That's a technical term. Now, this doesn't seem very difficult given what we've talked about. It's just instead of trying to heighten somebody's state, you take them into a state of deep relaxation so that they can open up their unconscious portions of their mind and begin to learn with the other mind. Now, we're not going to do anything therapeutic this time. All I want you to do is to set up the anchor, bring them all the way out so that they're totally alert, and then reach over and look them in the eye and say, relax, and touch that anchor and notice if they can go back in. If they hesitate at first, sometimes it takes a few minutes for it to set in. Just hold your finger there, smile, blink twice, and go, shut your eyes, and they'll go. The thing is that this allows you to have a way with clients so that they don't get frenzied. Especially for those of you who do therapy, you may have worked with people that other therapists have had do something called catharting. And catharting is where you cry, whine, bemoan your problems, and go back and relive unpleasant experiences. Now, anyone who has studied rat psychology knows that if you go through an experience and build a generalization, if you go through it again, it reinforces it. This is my problem with cathartic therapies. What we really want is for people to go back through them, only to take their resources with them and be stronger, so that they can be more alive and to have more capabilities in lives, to feel more deeply, to do things more competently. It's not enough to have confidence. I want people to have competence too, so that they begin to have a zest for life, which allows them to really begin to enjoy ecstasy. And I found that states of relaxation are the perfect and unprecedented opportunity to begin to tell people that those memories can fade into the past to the point where they have no bearing on their future. They can remember that it's them, but each and every one of you in here, if you stop, there were things about you that were true at one time. And when you think about it now, you know it was true about you, but you don't, it's not like it wasn't you. It's like there are things you believed as a child and as a teenager that you believed and you know were important to you, but when you think about them now, it's like it's not even really a part of you. You know better. And what I do is put people into a state of relaxation and have them put things into that submodality so it simply has no more bearing on their life. I figure if something is unpleasant, once is enough. If it's pleasant, too much is not enough. It's just a philosophy. But as a precursor to this, I'd like you to go through and just induce a mild altered state by going through the list and literally having the person, if they're going deeper, their hand will go up, and you know to continue. And then if you do something which decreases their state, their hand will go down. This gives you the perfect vehicle to be able to know what you're doing that's working. And it's feedback alone that makes a communicator powerful. To know what you're doing, to know you're getting where you want to go, and so that you can induce heightened states of ecstasy and states of deep relaxation, so that you can run across the gamut of human experience and to be able to take people to wherever it is they want to go. The nice thing about deep states of relaxation is you can control heart rate, blood pressure, and you can do pain control. Because I know we have some doctors in here. Do we have any dentists? No dentists. I usually get a lot of dentists. They're in the U.S., they're a depressed crowd. For some reason, people don't like to see them. Can't imagine what they're an anchor for. Hi, how are you? By the way, the next time you go to a dentist, to teach you about how well your body has learned things, I want to show you something that you can do. If next time you go to a dentist, before they give you a shot of Novocaine, which is something you all love, right? You love that when they shove a needle in your jaw? And they always tell you, this probably is going to hurt a little bit. Great command to give you. But if you take the whole of your own mouth and you go like this, pull your cheek off, and wiggle it up and down. Try it. I'm serious. Pull it straight out first, and then wiggle it up and down. All right? And what you'll discover after a few minutes is you'll begin to feel something in your cheek, because your body has already learned Novocaine, and it already knows it. In fact, I'll make a deal with you guys. I mean, not that you guys have ever taken drugs, but wouldn't it be nice if you could induce any drug state you've ever had without the drug? Number one, it's legal. Number two, it's cheap. Wouldn't that be a nice thing to do? You guys probably wouldn't be interested in that, huh? It's like the little old lady in England said to me, there's a little old lady about 70 years old, she had blue hair and diamonds all over her, and I brought this up, and she was sitting in the middle of the audience, and she stood up and she went, Demerol! Said, it's yours with no side effects. Okay, so go ahead, get your partner, and remember again, the thing with the hand is very simple. You simply do not connect on the handshake. When you walk up to somebody, you put your hand out. As their hand comes out, you put your hand under their wrist, gently moving it across their eyes, and then you point and tell them to simply, you don't need to do it all the way, we've done it before. It's that thing. Because people look where you point. So as you gracefully take the wrist and move it across in front of their eyes and point, and you tell them to watch carefully how the changing focus of their eyes allows them to relax And then pass your hand in front of their eyes and tell them to close their eyes, take a deep breath, and relax. And see themselves relaxing more and more. And then simply run through the submodalities, because their hand will be up there where you left it, and have them lift their hand up and tell them, lift your hand up when you feel like you're going deeper, allow your hand to go down when you're feeling like you're becoming more conscious. And then go through and find out which submodalities they can alter to relax themselves. Because even if the next time you're in some situation where you get tense, you can go inside your head and just adjust the submodalities that way and mellow out. No need to get tense unless you feel like it. Then you just turn them the other way. Now, go for it. For some of you, this is brand new type material. And I would recommend, if you want to learn to do, especially to use relaxation techniques, that you read Patterns 1. Patterns 1 is all of the hypnotic language patterns that we distilled from Milton H. Erickson of Arizona, who is probably one of the world's most exquisite hypnotists. His ability to use tempo and to use language precisely, and always, if you're a professional communicator, learning to use language with precision is extremely important. Because I found that a lot of the people that were sent to me as quote-unquote impossible clients, that what had happened to them is either a parent, a teacher, or a professional therapist had installed in them hypnotic commands without realizing it. Hypnosis is the rule, not the exception. I don't care, Gestalt therapists told me they weren't doing hypnosis, but yet they had people hallucinating dead relatives. This strikes me as a deep trance phenomenon. That one of the clients that came to me was somebody who was suicidal. And he had been given the suggestion, he had a skin disorder, and the doctor told him, that he would just have to learn to live with it or kill himself. And they found a cure for it 3 years later. And of course, you know what that means. When he got the cure, that meant that he was going to have to kill himself. Now, when these kinds of suggestions are given, I had a kid that was sent to me by college, and he was simply incapable of learning to read or do math, but yet he could take an engine apart and put it back together. He could do all these. It didn't seem to be anything wrong with him. He just simply would go blank in his mind. And when he was in the elementary school, the teacher got frustrated at him, ran up to him and took a pencil and snapped it in front of his face and said, "You'll never learn any of this." And he didn't. Now, you have to understand that hypnosis is something, and suggestion is something that's going on. That if I tell you, now I don't want you to think of blue, what comes to your mind? That when, somebody, you open your door and somebody looks inside and goes, now, I don't want you to get upset. What happens to you? That learning to use language precisely so that you get the result you want is really the earmark of a communicator that understands that communication is a technology. That the knowledge of syntax, of voice tempo, of how to elicit responses, of how to anchor, and about how you influence the mind in general is the sensitivity to these things. We've spent years now distilling from great communicators what it is that they do that works. Most of them themselves had good days and bad days. That their consistency, because what they did unconsciously and intuitively, it was still great work, but they couldn't replicate it. They didn't know what they were doing. They cured some phobics, but not others. But they didn't know what it was that they did that worked, and what they did that was just flowers around it. That when we taught people to work with people who had fears and phobias, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, the phobia cure is really rather simple. You simply have people take what they're terrified of and see themselves in a slide, so they're disassociated with it, and it's not a movie. And float up to the side so that they can see themselves and the slide, kind of like being in the balcony of a theater. And then start the movie so they run through whatever the phobic incidence is, float back down in their body, float inside so they're right in the situation at the end of it, where they would have been scared. We'll run it backwards, like a movie rewinding on a projector. People walk backwards, talk backwards, and play circus music at the same time. And when it's done, when they go into the situation, they don't have fear. Now, this is kind of the Kurt Vonnegut approach to therapy, because what it does is you see, most of us have never run a memory backwards. But when you run a memory backwards, it reverses its meaning. So, I mean, as Vonnegut said in Slaughterhouse-Five, that when he slipped loose in time, they took a war movie and turned it into a peace movie. The planes flew over the burning city, sucked the flames up into little metal pellets, landed at the airport where they were carefully unloaded, shipped back to the United States, where plants disassembled them, and the elements were buried in the ground where they could never hurt anyone again. Now, the same thing, though, although it's just something in a book, the same thing is true about us, that the kinds of memories we have, that constantly when we run them, they reinforce our limitations. When you take them and run them backwards, it changes the meaning. It changes the implications so that when you get to the same anchors that were there before, they end up giving you the opposite kind of feeling. Now, that's just a little aside, something I thought you might want to think about. Now, I wanted to do one more thing today, and since we're kind of running out of time, I usually like to leave groups at the end of the day stoned out of their minds. But I don't like for people to take drugs, because they're too expensive and they're illegal. Now, some of the people in here have come and asked me, what do you do about pain control? And what do you, and, you know, I don't know why that came across their mind, but must have been something I said, I guess. That one of the things that I know about not just drugs, but about the human experience itself, is that any feeling that you've had, you can get back and have more of. And the same thing is true about drugs. Now, my friend Ed Reese, who is one of the people that is an owner of the Society of Neurolinguistic Programming, as a guy down in Florida, decided that since Florida being, you know, sort of the haven of world drug distribution at this point, that most of you have seen Miami Vice, the Narc and Snitch show they have on TV. They have that here, don't they? Miami Vice. Yeah, people are into it. Narcs and snitches and cops violating civil liberties. What a plot for a show. But anyway, in Florida, he ended up having a lot of people that had terrible drug habits. So what he wanted to do was to find a way where they could get the same buzz but didn't take the drugs, thereby not destroying their income and ending up in jail. But for those of you who have taken in your life a drug for pain control, whether it's Novocaine, Demerol, whether it's you've taken Valium for nerves, or have clients or friends who did, however you want to think about it. For those of you who, when, of course, in your younger days, experimented with drugs, who liked some of the effects but didn't like the side effects of drugs, and also those of you who work with people who have terminal pain. I worked on a project badly named the Pain Project. I always thought it should have been the Comfort Project, but I couldn't talk them into changing the name because they knew that they were right. That one of the things I wanted to develop was a way where people could get all of the relief that a drug could offer without the side effects and the body damage. Now, this is the way it works. What I want you to do is to take your partner and have them think of a drug. We call this drug of choice. Now, this means that you can think of a drug. You don't have to tell your partner what it is, just that you have identified it. In other words, that means, well, you can tell them if you're proud of it, but if you don't want to tell them for whatever reason, you don't have to. You just tell them that you know which drug it is. I mean, whether it's alcohol or coffee or, I mean, it can be anything. If you haven't taken any drugs, don't worry about it, you know. Just pick a feeling that you had sometime that you liked. This will work. It doesn't have to be drugs, but we use this particular technique to reinduce drug states. So if you have taken some drug, I mean, even if it's something you took at the dentist office, you know, or the doctor, or something that you happened to take as a teenager that you liked. Once you've identified it, then what your partner's job is to have you go back and remember as much about it as you can, because what they want to identify is the first 4 to 7 locations on the body that you felt it. Say, for example, if let's say the little old lady with blue hair, the first thing that she was aware of is she would feel this funny feeling in the top of her forehead. And then the next thing she was aware of is she'd feel a funny sensation in her cheeks, and then she would feel something that kind of ran down the surface of the skin in her arms. And then her toes would begin to tingle, and then she felt good all over. Now, once you've identified the literal locations, the only thing that matters to you is where they felt it. Because if you take somebody back and have them begin to literally focus their awareness on that location, in her case, the forehead, then the cheeks, then the surface of the arms, then the toes, the body knows, and the memory systems, literally the cortical connections that were built when you took the drugs, as you go through and focus your awareness in the same order, what happens is that it reinduces the memory that the body has of the drug state. So what your partner is going to do is they're going to write down 4 to 7 locations, and whether it was tingling or warmth, and what kind of a sensation it was. Then what they're going to do, because I want you to use the same partner you just had in this exercise, okay? Because I want you to go and use your anchor for deep relaxation. As soon as you've identified the locations, fire off the relaxation anchor. And as the person closes their eyes, simply tell them to begin and start with the first location. And I want you to cycle through the 4 to 7 locations. And I want you to go round and round 3 or 4 or 5 times until the person looks like they're stoned out of their mind. Basically. Now, and you can ask them, to just simply nod or shake their head yes or no, and they feel the drug, and if you're getting a good yes, then tell them that anytime they want to reinduce and feel this feeling, they can reach over and just simply squeeze their own wrist. When you tell them, squeeze their wrist, so that it induces kinesthetic memory. And then tell them that when you squeeze the other wrist, or they squeeze the other wrist, that they can come back to full consciousness. And then what I want you to do is to tell them to come all the way back into the room, but to keep the drug state with them. And then have them come back and look around the room and be a little high, and then reach over and touch their wrist, and then switch partners. Well, how did you like your first day of Richard's form of NLP? I hope that during the course of the day that I could impress upon you that I think learning should be connected with fun. And I think the same thing is true about therapy, education, all kinds of things. That learning does not need to go slowly, because learning is really an attitude where you just can go through it and find out what you're going to get. That a lot of times I find that people want to know what they're going to learn before they learn it. I have people call my office and ask what I'm going to teach in a workshop before it happens when it's 2 weeks long. And I can't imagine what they think someone's going to say to them. But if you think of the number of things that we've been through during the course of today, and the number of variations that could be run on those things. I just, by the way, released a new book, which I don't think is over here yet, but it's called An Insider's Guide to Submodalities. And it's something that offers you a variety of choices about how to use submodalities. There's a book out now that I noticed upstairs called Using Your Brain for a Change. That's a good book that offers you a lot of choices about how to use submodalities. It strikes me that in terms of behavioral technologies, that NLP may be on the leading edge, but it's still in its infancy. Then I know that a lot of my colleagues thought that we'd figured it all out, 8 or 9 years ago, but it's not my attitude. There's still worlds upon worlds of things for us to learn to do better and quicker. I know, that when I learned that brief therapy took 10 weeks, I was not impressed, And there's a place that has a phobia cure that only takes 6 months to do desensitization. I like to think in terms of minutes. That's a nice round figure for me. But ultimately, we're going to learn enough about the human mind to learn things about attitude adjustment, about changing beliefs, without worrying about mind control. Because as far as I can tell, learning about mind control shouldn't be something that scares people. It's a question of who's controlling the mind. And if it's a question of controlling your own, learning to drive your own bus, learning to be in charge of your feelings, and learning to change your attitude and your beliefs so that you really utilize the life that you were given. I noticed that in my travels that there are lots and lots of people that spend 90% of their day worrying. And it seems to me that if they took the same amount of energy and put it into solving problems, creating excitement, and definitely into creating more ecstasy, then on this planet we'd have a lot less trouble and a lot more fun. that one of the things that I try to instill upon people is an attitude that if you begin to have fun, it's going to spread. That as you begin to learn how to enjoy yourself and to enjoy the things that you have to do, not just going out and raging and having a good time, but learning how to turn your work. See, I know that in the human potential movement in California, a weird thing happened with the advent of hot tubs. It always struck me as a weird thing to invite somebody over for dinner and a bath. I don't care what anybody says, but I do know this is why aliens have not landed on Earth. Because the best place to enter the Earth's atmosphere from the outside puts you down and across the coast of California. And when the aliens look down and see people boiling their neighbors in their backyard, they go, cannibals. Now, for me, in terms of the human potential movement, a lot of what happened is it turned out that it made people dissatisfied with their jobs and dissatisfied with themselves. And it strikes me is that you can make people enjoy the life they have and want more. That people don't have to drop out and turn on to get on with business. In fact, that's counterproductive. The businesses that I work with, we concentrate on making it so that employees are happier and more productive, so everybody makes more money, but it still makes them just that much more capable of learning to do more and to change. There's plenty of things to be done in this world. There's no shortage of tasks to be solved and of pleasure to be had. Well, this morning I wanted to start off by continuing along the theme that we were working on yesterday. I want to do some more things with submodalities to familiarize you a little bit more, and I want to begin to add some other elements. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about today is about learning, because to me, NLP in and of itself is a behavioral technology that's designed to accelerate learning. Now, yesterday what we were doing was beginning to deal with the motif of using the brain deliberately so that you can begin to take the thinking elements so that you can begin to control things like what you're motivated about and what you're not, what you enjoy and what you don't, and even being able to take the states of things like ecstasy and things like relaxation and do them deliberately. The thing that we did at the end of the day yesterday about being able to control your physiology to the point where you can reinduce a drug state so that you don't have to take the drug, thereby removing the side effects, the legal problems, and sort of saves you a lot of money. When I did this in Southern California one time, there was a little Chicano guy there that looked at me and came up and shook my hand after I did the drug of choice thing, and he said, "You got no idea how much money this is going to save me. I can buy a new car once a month." Now, I don't know how much drugs he took, but I'm glad he learned the exercise. He might have been short-lived otherwise. Now, the thing about learning is that when you begin to take NLP and begin to examine what I'm much more concerned about than problems, although you have to admit that's got to be one of the cutest schizophrenics you've ever seen. Did you guys watch the schizophrenic on the tape? I mean, this guy was one of the most delightful clients I had because he was so serious about all of this, these figures and talking to him. In fact, I don't know how far you got in the film, but there's a part where they all got together and took him out and tried to lynch him. At the beginning of the second session. Okay, well, it's during the second session where he cops to the fact that they got together and they were going to lynch him, which is pretty, that's kind of a Virginia Satir parts party, but a real serious one. It's when your internal parts begin to become on the outside and they decide to get rid of you, it's not a good sign, I think. By the end of the third session, we begin, this guy is out of the hospital he's living in and living in what they call a three-quarter-way house in the States, where him and 4 other schizophrenics share an apartment and do their own cooking and stuff. And they're starting to go down to the mall and cruise for chicks. And I always, there was something about the image it put in my mind of these 4 schizophrenics going down to the mall and looking at girls. And see, I taught him a little bit about flirting, but it didn't quite come out right. I taught him to go look at a girl like this. It came out like this, right? And I just thought, here's some poor girl walking down the mall, and these 4 guys come up and go, ha, 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 like that. sort of a scene out of Night of the Living Dead. But see, to me, like, one of the problems that I had working with him is that when I worked with him in the first session, I insisted that they take him off drugs. Because it always seems to me that if you get somebody all fucked up, it's kind of hard for them to use their brain. You know, that's one of the things about being on drugs. But even as, you know, when I took him off drugs and we got him into the states where he began to have control over some of this stuff, as soon as the session was over, they put him back on drugs. Now, when I found this out, I said, why the hell did you do that? And they said, well, he might have had problems. Now, as an attitude, this is one of the things that I get real pissy about. And in the United States, for example, there's a thing called hyperactive children. Now, I don't know if you guys have hyperactive kids in school, but one of my pet peeves is the thought that the kid has too much energy. So what we're going to do is we're going to give him drugs twice a day so he doesn't upset the teacher and his parents. Now, in a culture that seems to be so worried about people taking drugs, because I don't think you should start taking drugs till you're at least 12. And then, you know, you should take good ones, and Ritalin just doesn't happen to be one of them. I decided to take it on as a personal sort of vendetta. So I started going into school boards and going up and raising my hand and saying, I have an issue I want to talk about. You guys are giving children, you know, in some classes, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, Ritalin. Because Ritalin operates on children that are hyperactive in the inverse fashion. That's what they claim, is that it slows them down. Although they all look like burned out speed freaks to me. They're all like this. So I said to them, I said, look, if on normal adults, Ritalin operates at speed, and on these children it slows them down, and since we don't want to set a principle of our children taking drugs all the time, and since it's not harmful to your health, it strikes me that the thing to do is we collect all the Ritalin up from the kids and give it to the adults so they can keep up with them. Now, this is where adults begin to stutter. And this is the same kind of thing, because I always started asking psychiatrists, have you ever taken any of that shit? You know, and for example, this kid here, they had him on Halophene. And Halophene will knock you on your ass. And no wonder he talks like this. Looks around and starts hallucinating floridly. I'm sure that he was able to do it on his own, but it sure isn't going to get you to act normal. And I mean, it's a very, very serious drug. And I mean, I suggest as a psychiatrist, if it's good enough for your patient, then it shouldn't hurt you. If it's not bad for your health. And this is the point at which you will notice that social scientists as well as hard scientists move into what I refer to as the fudge factor and the finagle phenomenon. This is where all of their excuses for their behavior begin to sound like lies that 12-year-olds tell late at night. Because there is no real good reason for the fact that we don't have the technologies to be able to teach children and be able to work with people. And the reason we don't have them is because we've been coming up with excuses, like schizophrenia is genetic. My answer, so what? There's risk that doesn't stop you from being able to teach somebody to control their neurology enough to live a normal and productive life. And it's just that, to begin with, they're afraid of guys like that, and I don't understand how they could be. That guy is classified as a paranoid schizophrenic. Now, I can understand why he might seem a little paranoid, and when you touch him, he jumps out of his skin, among other things. And I mean, you know, when people come off the TV and follow you around, you might get a little paranoid. Think about it yourself. I mean, if you were sitting there and somebody hopped out of the television and went, what are you doing? You know, you might get a little weird too. But by the same token, if you begin to think of everything human beings do as a skill, psychology has, and education adopted, the medical model that people are broken. And they are not. People are just good learners. The problem is they'll learn any damn thing that comes along. So some of us learn to think that we're stupid, we're unlovable. Some of us learn to think that we're not smart. Some of us learn to think that, you know, that we'll never be able to love deeply or feel things deeply or to be able to be intelligent. I mean, I was talking to a lady in this seminar who's been very successful at what she did. She's got other people working for her. She's been incredibly successful, and she found out she had brain damage. Now, if they'd have found that out as a kid, she probably would be sitting somewhere drooling out of the corner of her mouth. But see, if you don't know that something is wrong with you, if you don't know that, you know, they don't have all these ways of diagnosing and classifying, the inability of people to teach There is no such thing as a learning disability. There are only teaching disabilities. Now, most of the time, people don't like that because they think of it as blame, and it's not. Whenever you accept total responsibility, then you have the opportunity to be able to do something about it. When you view every client you work with, the fact that they haven't gotten there as being totally your fault, then you have total ability to change your behavior and do something about it. Now, over the years, I've done things, and I don't know if Terry's ever told any of you, but we've done some fairly strange things with people. I mean, there was a client that I had, and I read a long time ago about Milton X. Erickson. They had a client that thought he was Jesus Christ. He was a delusional schizophrenic. And so Milton walked up to this guy, and he looked at him, and he goes, "I heard you used to be a carpenter." What's the guy going to say? No? Got him by the nuts there, and he said, "And I heard you believe in helping others." The guy went, "Yeah." So Milton sent him out in the back of the hospital with the carpenters to help him build a wing on the back. 6 months later, the guy owned a construction company. Now, when I heard this story, and knowing what I know about delusionals, I knew it couldn't have been that easy. That was just what he told us about. I knew you had to do a little more. So one time when I was with a particular individual, I found out, I was working with the guy, I found out that, I was working with a schizophrenic who says to me the following, he goes, "I gotta get out of this place, man. The guy in the next room is crazy. I mean, this guy sees snakes all over the floor, and he thinks the guy next door is crazy." Right? And me, I was asked, I brought him a snake book and had him identifying them and classifying them and putting them in aquariums. And then I took all the aquariums away. It was some deep shit, man. But I mean, instead of, jumping up on his bed, screaming and yelling, I had him out there with a snake stick, picking them up one by one, putting them in the aquarium. And, and then I took him to the zoo. I gave him a receipt from the zoo, which totally convinced him. See, there's one way to deal with schizophrenics. Well, see, you may laugh, but see, they always say that schizophrenics are people who are not in touch with reality. And you have two choices. One, you can try to convince them that what they're experiencing isn't real. Or the other one you can do is what I do. You can make it real. Because when you make it real, then what happens is that they're no longer out of touch with reality. I had a guy that heard voices out of the wall sockets, right, telling him things. So I slammed a speaker in the wall socket, right? He's sitting in his bed, and suddenly out of the wall socket comes, "Hey, you!" Then he turns around and he goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I've taken over here. Mind your own business." Now, it's not exactly what you would consider the most professional and austere of approaches. But the difference is I want my clients to get down and get back to life. Now, with the guy next door, the guy in the hospital that saw the snakes, the guy next door thought he was Jesus Christ, and I thought, oh boy, it's taken me 12 years to find one. But finally I found one. Because when I heard Milton's story, there was something I always wanted to try. These little things stick in your mind. So, instead, I dressed up as a carpenter. The hammer and the belt and a little 5-pound maul. Got myself 2 big 4x4s and dragged them into the room. Laid them out on the floor. One 7 feet long, one about 6 feet long. Took a tape measure and went over it, measured it, like this. He got it up and he goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "Don't mind me, I'm Jewish." Measured them across, put the 2 things across each other, and pulled out these big 12-penny nails and started going, whack, whack, like this. And the guy goes, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "You're Jesus Christ, aren't you? It's almost Easter." And this guy sat up in his bed, and then I went and I put 3 of the 12-penny nails on one thing and one on the other, and I took a felt pen and made a mark like this in the chair, right? Put his feet across one another like that and put an X, right? And went back to there, and this guy sat up and he went, "Wait a minute, man, I'm schizophrenic." And I went, "Well, I thought you were Jesus Christ. It's just a job, Now, the thing is, I always say, push it right to the wall, I mean, there have been people sitting around telling him about his parents and stuff. It's like, the lady I told you about yesterday that had the phobia of gum chewing, because her father chewed tobacco and held her upside down. The way I got her as a client, I'll tell you, is 2 psychiatrists brought this woman to me, and they told me, quote unquote, the following. They did not want me to fix her. All they wanted me to do, because I was a very good hypnotist, was to age or guess her and find out the truth, because they both had a theory. One had decided that she had been stuck at the level of breast feeding, and that the sound itself was related to the psychosomatic fixation at the age of breastfeeding. Right? The other one had decided that actually that she had walked in on her parents when they were having intercourse as children, and that sound was actually related to the traumatic experience of the youth. This is what I refer to as somebody that had so much education their brain fell out. My answer is I goofed. I had to apologize. I fixed her accidentally. So what can I say? It's a compulsion. Now, the thing that I'd like to allude to you is that when you begin to think about learning, for example, when you train people in anything, I talked about the difference. See, for example, they taught me to spell phonetically. Now, and then they wonder why I couldn't spell, right? You wonder why I can't spell? Well, it's because the educational system taught me how to spell. Now, whatever guy made up the system called phonetics had a real sense of humor, right? I mean, when you call something that's, you can't even spell phonics phonetically. You know, I mean, you go in there and he goes, well, we got a way to make children feel stupid for generations. Now, the same thing is true about other forms of learning. When you want to know, for those of you who are teachers, when you want to develop a curriculum, the thing is go and ask people who can do it. What do you do? When I was teaching college, I walked into a chemistry class one time. And there was a professor up there, and he was standing up on the little thing, and he said, now, I want you to imagine a big mirror right here. Right? And in front of it, I want you to see a helix molecule. And slowly have it rotate this way and watch what happens in the mirror. Now, the people who were real visual were going, yeah. But the people who were real auditory were going. Now, and of course, this was one of the professors I went to talk to because he was mad at me for using hypnosis in school. And I refer to that as a full-blown hallucination myself. The thing is that if you begin to find out what the people do that can do any task well, people when they learn to do martial arts. See, if you learn to do martial arts or diving in college or something like that, or gymnastics, people who do these things have a tendency to watch somebody do it and make a movie out of it, a clip, run it over and over again. Then they place themselves inside the clip and see themselves doing it. And then they switch around and step inside it and move along with it. Now, if you don't do that, you're never going to have good form. Now, the people who are good at anything, whether it's music, whether it's being able to write, people who can do poetry. For example, can you imagine what Vonnegut's strategy is? To create stories? I mean, he has a very particular way of going about writing. And it's different than a different writer. We taught children 25 different internal ways of being able to create stories. We wouldn't be wasting their time. We would be teaching them how to think instead of what to think. See, schools in the U.S., and one of the reasons we started the Re-Educating America project, is I found out that what spelling was in schools is that every week they gave kids a list of words and said, memorize them. But that doesn't tell a kid how to memorize them. It doesn't even tell them how to use them. All it told them to do was they take the list. See, for me, the first time they did that, they gave me a list, I memorized the words. I came back and they asked me how to spell one of them. And I said, now, wait a minute. I said, I can tell you which words were on the list. You didn't tell me how to tell you what letters were in them. Now, the thing is if we want to begin to educate people, and for me, I think of it, even when I'm selling a car, as an educational process. You have to teach people how to buy the right car, buy a car that'll work for them. You have to teach them about their own decision strategies and how to make them work. Because some people, their decision strategy never stops. Even after they buy something, they continue to go round and round in their head. Was it the right thing? No. Was it the right? Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. And it seems to me the job of a salesman is to make sure that people don't do that kind of shit. People torture themselves enough. See, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm feeling a little down or something, I go out and buy a new set of clothes. Feel great. Some of you people do that? Yeah. Feel makes you feel good. So if you go out and buy something like a car, you should feel great. Let alone if you buy a house, you should feel wonderful. But most of the time, people feel worse when they buy high-ticket items. And the thing is, a good salesperson knows how to make somebody have attached to what they buy a good feeling, so that they feel that they did the right thing, let alone they should sell them something they can afford. Now, it seems to me when we start dealing in the field where we start doing therapy, where we start educating people, But also part of the process is to be able to get people to become generative. That is, to do things themselves. See, I mean, how many of you took composition in school, and what did the teacher tell you to do? Go write a story. I mean, for this, they pay you. You know, they could put that on tape. I mean, did they ever tell you how to think about it, whether to make pictures in your head, how to describe them? For example, Vonnegut does a fascinating thing when he writes. One of the things that he does is he thinks of it as writing a letter to his sister, who is no longer alive. But he sees her across the typewriter, and he's talking to her. And as he talks, he types. But he does one other little twist. What he does is he starts out with the bizarrest situation he can think of somewhere in the future. And then he jumps back to the present and connects them together, so that he has to create a pathway so that it logically goes from the normal present experience we're having now to this bizarre reality. Have any of you ever read his book where he starts out and talks about he lives on the island of death, New York, which I can understand where that came from, and, you know, where everybody has died, and he's one of two Mongoloid idiots and is the president of the United States. And then he comes back to the present, to a normal time, and describes how that came to be. Now, this begins to give you a way of writing a story that way, let alone writing a story the way other people do. The geniuses that exist on this earth, and the reason I've modeled people in all different professions. I mean, I went and modeled Moshe Feldenkrais because I wanted to learn what he knew before he died. Is I have this funny idea that knowledge should progress. That whenever somebody learns something, their students should get better at it. They shouldn't spend their time trying to achieve where a genius was. They should start there. See, I'm not teaching you in the past 2 days where I started. If you had to go through what Terry went through to learn, you'd all be in bad shape. There are people stuck at various levels of my development all over the world. And it doesn't seem like a good plan that people should have to learn and go through everything I did to get there. But it's a funny thing about learning. They try, when I was your age, I had to do this, so you'll have to do it too. Now, if that is, what happens is knowledge is only going to progress up to the point that a person can do. So every generation, we're going to know a little less. And that's not the way it's supposed to go. We should start out with the most elegant things that are there. The things I'm teaching you are what are right on the edge. They're the things that make it easy, not the things where I did it wrong. You don't have to make all of my mistakes. I made them for you. It's not that I'm such a genius or a great learner. It's just that I make more mistakes faster than anyone does and notice. Because I've noticed a thing, and I don't know if it's true over here, but it sure is true in America, that when people do something that doesn't work, they try to just do it louder. See, I noticed this in foreign countries, but I live near Mexico, so when Americans go into Mexico, when they walk up to a Mexican that doesn't speak English, they'll do this. They'll go, "Can you tell me where a bathroom is?" The person goes, "No speak English." He goes, "Can you tell me where the bathroom is?" As if you hit a certain volume, boom, it'll break that language barrier. Now, I've sort of noticed that if you run into a wall real hard and hit your head, it's best to turn. But this is not the way that people approach learning. We have tried the educational approach that we have in our country. And from what I heard last night, there's a little of it going on here too. That we have found ways of making sure that, think of it, a newborn baby, right, who can't even speak language, can learn to speak a language in under 2 years. And it doesn't even know how to speak one. But it takes the educational system 8, 9, 10 years to teach them to write it down. Now that's not what I call real slick. To me, we've got to be doing something wrong, you know, and it's got to be that there are some kids that are learning to write like that. What we need to know is what they do. For those of you, how many of you in here speak more than one language? How many of you learned at school? And you can speak it fluently? Oh, no. Sure. Well, see, for me, when I took language in school, I took Spanish in school, every word ended up meaning pegboard. And because they forgot to connect it with experience. Now, it always reminds me of when I was in Puerto Rico one time. I got in a taxi cab and I said, "I'd like to go to the hotel." And the taxi cab driver said, "You would like to go to the hotel? You would like to go to the hotel?" And I went, "Yeah, yes I would." And he said, "Okay, we are leaving now. Okay, we are leaving now." And I went, burlesque, I know that anywhere. He didn't know that you didn't have to say every sentence twice. Now, as a model for learning, hey, after about 45 minutes of that, I was climbing the walls in the taxi cab. I was going, will you shut up? Will you shut up? Now, the thing is what I'm suggesting to you is that what NLP offers as a technology is for us to go through, and not just me, because I can't do this all myself, okay, guys? I expect of you, in whatever profession you come from, to go back and to have a sense of adventure in front of you. Because as you sat down yesterday and began to elicit some modalities, the first couple of times you guys were going, this is tough. But then by the afternoon, you guys were going, yeah, I got this. Now, if it's that easy to learn, but now you can begin to do things. For example, remember how we did the confusion to understanding? Remember that yesterday? This is yes. No. We'll catch up here. Probably one of the things that didn't dawn on you is, wouldn't it be nice if you could begin to acquire somebody else's ability to understand? Because you see, you only have your own right now. But you see, if we're going to begin to get into what I call generativity, this is where we go, fuck the problems, man. All we got to do is put people in states of ecstasy and they won't bitch about it. But if we can begin now to make people wanted learners. Because what I want to do is go back to the exercise you did yesterday. Remember, you went back and you found out how somebody goes from confusion to understanding. And what I want you to do, where we're going to start here, is I want you to learn how to take the altered state that I taught you yesterday and to go from your confusion to your understanding. Now, you remember you did that yesterday? Well, I want you to move from your understanding and try their confusion. Not that you don't have enough ways to be confused, but it will provide you the opportunity to then go to their understanding. Because it's not just that you're able to do this with an individual, but it gives you the ability to begin to do something that I do. For those of you who are therapists, whenever I work with a client, if I can't do what they do, then I won't fix it. See, because if I can be able to generate the internal state. Now, for example, I told you yesterday about the lady that fell down and had psychotic episodes when people were late. My approach to being able to work with her is something that we're going to do today. Is that what I do is I stop and I always say to them, I go, look, wouldn't it really be nice if just for once, you got to have a day off from your problem? Shit, you get a day off from work. Most problems are more work than work is, isn't it? I mean, I asked this schizophrenic, I said, God, isn't this a lot of work? How many times he was telling me that he did it, I asked him how many of these little episodes he had between his house and when he went to the bank. And he went 8. And I said, how many blocks is it? And he went like 6. And I said, Jesus, I said, that sounds like a lot of work. And he went, God, Richard, you're right. Now, the thing is if you stop and think about it, what I do with people is I say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that I'm just temporary ill mental health. All you have to do is to give me a good job description, and I'll fill in for you. And then you don't have to have your personal problem. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, by doing this, I set a frame around it where what it is it is my job to learn what they're doing. And it does 2 nice things. One, it gets people out of the mode of thinking remedially. Because they're talking about children being broken at the age of 6, 7, and 8 years old, being educationally handicapped in the U.S. What kind of a term is that? Did you have limp learning lobes or something? It just doesn't fly with me. They never talk about it as a teaching disability, because if it's a teaching disability, all we have to do is learn more, and we'll know what to do. And that means if we're trying this and it doesn't work, if nothing else, do something else. And it's the thing that I've always done with clients, no matter what domain I've worked in. If what you're doing is not working, then you simply vary it and do something else. And if you try enough things, you're going to find something that will work, especially if you start out the way I'm suggesting. Start out by knowing what's going on. and thinking of it as a learning achievement instead of something being wrong. So when I sat down with this lady, and I asked her what the problem was, and she explained to me that she fell down and had panic attacks when people are late. So I said, well, the first thing we have to know, and this is where you're going to start, you have to know, well, when do you do it? Because you just don't have panic attacks any old time. And she said, well, when I know people are late. And I said, well, how do you know? And she said, well, I first have to arrange it. So I imagine she didn't make too many appointments, but the thing is first thing is just like I told you, disappointment requires adequate planning. Well, so did her problem. She had to arrange to meet somebody. Then she had to keep track of it. Well, what did you do in your mind? Well, what she did is she set up a clock. She put a clock in her head, saw the time they were supposed to arrive, and their face in the middle of it. So when it came to that time, she would look up at the clock. And I said, and what I do is I went inside and I tried it. I said, okay, so tell me you're going to meet me in 3 minutes. She told me, I made the clock. And I told her to go outside and wait 5. She came back in and I said, I don't feel any panic. I said, how do you make the fear? She looked at me like I was just an inexperienced person. And this is what I love about using this technique. People get cocky about their disorders. She looked at me and she goes, no, Richard. He said, it's not that. You have to start seeing them in car accidents. And I went, oh, of course. Silly me. And I said, no, from what angle? Because, I said, how far away is it? Because she had mentioned the word distance, so I knew it was going to be important. I said, well, how far away am I? She said, well, you start out across the street, so you can't quite see what happened. And then she said, and then you check the time, and each time a minute goes by, you move closer. And it gets bigger and closer and bloodier. Now, I did that, and suddenly I was in a panic attack. My heart doing this. Now, I said, that works. Now, but by the same token, it gave her the ability to understand that this is something she learned to do, something she had mastered. Because when people understand that what they thought was an impossible problem is something that they're a master of, it means that they can do it deliberately.